Have you ever, like, sat in one of those really high-stakes meetings
Oh, yeah.
where everyone around the table is just throwing out these massive, incredibly confident numbers?
And projecting absolute certainty.
Exactly. But then you look around and you suddenly realize, with this kind of absolute dread, that no one in this room actually knows if any of this is true.
No one has any idea. It's terrifying.
It really is. And we are looking at a case study today of a massive tech startup where that exact illusion of certainty almost killed the entire company.
Yeah, it's honestly the defining paradox of modern corporate culture. I mean, we have more dashboards, right? More analytics, more tracking software than at any point in human history.
Oh, totally. Data is everywhere.
Exactly. Yet, at the critical moment of decision-making, organizations just completely abandon the data. They revert to this collective delusion. Because when survival is on the line, people will stretch the truth to survive the hour, even if it dooms the quarter.
Right, right. So for this deep dive today, we are tearing down the introductory concepts of our source material to really analyze the anatomy of a profoundly broken sales process.
And it is broken.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
The setting here is a disastrous quarterly business review, or QBR, at a billion-dollar tech startup called Forgo. And we are going to literally watch in real time as a high-growth system just collapses under the weight of its own comfortable fictions.
Which is such a great way to put a comfortable fiction.
Yeah. And look, whether you are an entrepreneur, a manager, or just, an individual contributor trying to get executive buy-in, you are going to learn the crucial difference here between hoping for an outcome and actually engineering a process to control it.
Because, look, hope is a fundamentally necessary human emotion, right? We need it.
Sure.
But it's a catastrophic business strategy. The gap between hoping for a win and controlling the variables of that win, that is exactly where companies bleed cash. They misallocate resources, and they ultimately fail.
Right. Because failing to measure reality accurately, like choosing the comfort of a lie over the friction of the truth, that will bankrupt an organization way faster than any external competitor ever could.
Absolutely. 100%.
So let's start with the ritual itself, the QBR.
The dreaded QBR.
Right, because in theory, this is supposed to be the ultimate safe environment, isn't it? Like, the sources describe the ideal state as a place where lessons shared become lessons learned.
That's the ideal. Yeah.
You bring a stalled account to the table, you lay out the messy reality of why it's stuck, and then the collective brainpower of the executive team just, helps you unblock it.
That is exactly how it should work.
Yeah.
But the reality at Forgo, and honestly in most organizations, is that it devolves into this brutal one-way interrogation.
Right.
You've got 60 people in a room, the air conditioning's humming, the CEO is just staring you down, and you are called to the podium to basically defend your existence.
It sounds like a trial.
It is. You are describing a high-threat environment. And, when humans are placed in high-threat environments, their primary objective stops being problem-solving.
It shifts to survival.
Immediately.
Yeah.
It's just to self-preservation. Nobody wants to stand under that white-hot spotlight in front of 60 peers and say, my pipeline is dead and I have nothing closing.
Yeah, I mean, the professional humiliation there is just too severe.
Way too severe. So the reps adapt. They distort reality, and they primarily oscillate between two extremes.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the first is sandbagging, where they hide real deals to artificially lower expectations.
Right, setting the bar super low.
Exactly. And the second, which is actually more dangerous, is happy ears.
Happy ears. That's the chronic condition of hearing what you want to hear, right?
Precisely. A customer says something like, oh, this looks interesting. And the rep immediately translates that internally to, they are signing the contract tomorrow. It is a form of cognitive dissonance. The rep genuinely convinces themselves of a reality that just doesn't exist. Because, acknowledging the alternative, that they are actually failing.
It's just too painful.
Exactly. So they filter out all the negative signals. A missed meeting isn't a lack of interest, right? It's just, oh, the client is busy.
Right. Or, a request for a massive discount isn't a lack of perceived value. It's just a standard procurement strategy.
Exactly. They rationalize everything.
But, okay, wait. I need to challenge that framing for a second, though.
Sure.
Because if you are building a startup or if you are on the front lines trying to generate revenue from scratch, isn't relentless optimism essentially a job requirement?
It's definitely a factor.
Right. You have to believe you are going to win just to have the energy to pick up the phone after being rejected 50 times. So why are we classifying happy ears as this deeply dangerous pathology when it sounds suspiciously like the exact grit every founder is praised for?
That's a really good question. And the distinction there lies in where you apply the optimism. See, optimism is the fuel required to initiate the action. You need optimism to make the cold call. You absolutely need optimism to believe your product can solve a problem in the world.
Right, you need that spark.
Exactly. But the moment you engage with the reality of a customer, optimism has to be entirely replaced by rigorous, objective qualification.
Oh, I see.
Right. Happy ears apply optimism to the evidence itself, which completely corrupts your diagnostic ability. If you are blindly optimistic about the actual state of a deal, you don't ask the hard questions.
You just coast?
You coast. You don't verify if your contact actually has the authority to spend money. You just float along on the good vibes of a friendly conversation until the end of the quarter finally arrives, the deal doesn't close, and you have this massive revenue shortfall that blindsides the entire company.
It sounds a lot like pilot spatial disorientation.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, like a pilot flies into a thick cloud bank, they lose sight of the horizon, and their inner ear tells them they are flying straight up. Their optimism, or like their gut feeling, says, hey, we're fine. But if they don't actively force themselves to look down at the altimeter and trust the actual instruments over their own feelings,
They crash.
they will fly the plane directly into the side of a mountain.
That is the precise mechanism of failure.
Yeah.
Happy ears are simply a refusal to look at the instrument panel.
Wow.
And for anyone leading a team, you really have to realize that when your reps refuse to look at the instruments, it is almost always a rational response to the culture you have built as a leader.
Wait, so it's the manager's fault?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
If you punish the truth, if you publicly execute people for bringing you bad news early, you are actively training your organization to lie to you.
Right, because why would I tell you I'm failing if you're just going to yell at me?
Exactly. You must engineer an environment where bad news is not just accepted, but demanded early. If a deal is dead, you need to know on day 14, not day 90.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because if they fear your reaction, they will feed you comfortable fictions until it is mathematically impossible to fix the revenue gap.
Okay, so let's actually watch this exact dynamic play out at the podium, back in our Forgo case study.
Yes, let's look at Shannon.
Right, the first rep called up in the QBR is Shanner. She handles outside sales, she projects this incredibly tough, hard-knocks exterior, and she speaks with absolute, unwavering confidence.
Total confidence.
So she stands up and she forecasts a $250,000 deal with a massive New York financial institution.
And within 30 seconds of her talking, she unknowingly reveals that she is flying completely blind.
Totally. I mean, the red flags are glaring.
Yeah.
She proudly claims there is, quote, no competition for this massive contract.
Which is almost never true for a $250,000 deal.
Right. And then in the next breath, she just casually admits she hasn't even spoken to her primary contact in 10 days.
It's astounding.
And when pressed on a totally different account later on, she mentions the client is demanding a 70% discount. And she says it as if that's just some minor administrative hurdle.
A 70% discount is not an administrative hurdle. That is a massive red flag about product value.
Exactly. She is operating purely on vibes. But honestly, what is truly shocking to me here is how her managers react. Or, well, rather, how they fail to react.
Yeah, Shannon's lack of situational awareness is definitely a problem. But the catastrophic systemic failure here belongs entirely to her leadership.
How so?
Just listen to the anatomy of the questions her managers ask her. They ask things like, when will it come in? And do you think they'll buy this quarter? Or are you worried about this one?
They are essentially asking her to rate her own level of delusion.
That's exactly what they're doing. They are opinion-based questions, not factual inquiries.
Right.
They are asking her to predict the future based on her current emotional state. The managers themselves are suffering from secondary happy ears.
Secondary happy ears. I love that.
They hear the words New York financial institution and $250,000, and they just get an adrenaline hit. They want the prestige and the revenue so badly that they willfully suspend their own disbelief.
So they stop acting as executives and start acting as cheerleaders.
Yes.
I mean, it's basically like going to the emergency room, right?
Yeah.
You go in with severe abdominal pain.
Right, yeah.
And instead of the doctor ordering an MRI or a blood test.
They just ask how you feel.
Exactly. They just look at you and say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that this isn't appendicitis?
Which is terrifying.
Right. And you say, oh, I'm feeling pretty optimistic, so they just discharge you. They are prioritizing bedside manner over diagnostic medicine.
And then, the patient dies in the parking lot.
Literally.
In a healthy organization, those managers would ignore Shannon's confidence entirely, and they'd run the diagnostic tests.
Right, they look at the altimeter.
Exactly. Instead of asking, when will it come in, a competent leader asks, does the economic buyer at the client actually know they're expected to spend $250K this quarter?
Right, is the money actually allocated?
Yes. And when Shannon says there is no competition, the manager must ask, have we verified that with their procurement department? Or are we just taking the word of a mid-level champion who might not even know their own internal processes?
Wow, yeah, that's a very different type of question.
It's forensic. And when a client asks for a 70% discount, the manager doesn't ask if Shannon is worried. The manager asks, what is the specific quantified business pain they are trying to solve, and why is our solution currently generating so little perceived value that they think it's worth a fraction of the price?
Which brings us to the core takeaway for this specific failure mode, right? Like, never let the size of the brand or the sheer dollar amount of a potential win short-circuit your diagnostic process.
Never.
The bigger the deal, the more rigorous the MRI needs to be.
Absolutely. But of course, Shannon survives her time at the podium.
She does. She gives the managers the comfortable fiction they desperately wanted to hear. She even dangles the hope of an extra $50,000 just to keep them happy, and they just let her sit down.
Yeah. She successfully trades a long-term disaster for short-term relief.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the next rep in the hot seat, Carlos. And this is where the narrative really shifts from passive delusion to active organizational toxicity.
Oh, Carlos' situation is so revealing.
Because if Shannon was punished by her own optimism, Carlos is punished for his accuracy.
Yes.
Carlos is, well, he's a former athlete. He's very grounded, very analytical. He steps up to the podium and flatly states, my forecast is $175,000. Now, this is a massive problem in the room because his quota is $300,000.
And the gap between $175,000 and $300,000 is exactly where the true culture of an organization is tested.
So his manager, Andy, immediately panics.
Yeah.
Andy starts leaning on him in front of the entire room. Carlos admits he has another large deal in the pipeline that, could bridge the gap and push him to $250,000. But Carlos explicitly refuses to add it to the official forecast.
And his reasoning is flawless.
Right. He explains that while the customer wants the product, he doesn't fully understand their internal legal and approval timeframe. Because he doesn't control the timeline, he just refuses to forecast the revenue.
Carlos is demonstrating the absolute highest level of professional maturity in that room.
Yeah, he seemed like the only sane person there.
Because he knows intimately what he does not know. He has mapped the customer's environment, he understands the pain points, but he has identified a blind spot in his own process, which is the legal review cycle.
Right.
Because he cannot measure that variable, he refuses to guarantee the outcome. This is exact, rigorous scientific thinking.
But Andy, the manager, sees the scientific thinking as a political betrayal.
Yes, which is so toxic.
Andy actually tries to bully him into submission. Andy says, in front of all the executives, quote, will you be a team player and commit to the $300,000 that I know you can do?
It's wild.
It is a fascinating use of language, isn't it? Be a team player. He is framing mathematical accuracy as a character flaw and framing a complete fabrication as corporate loyalty.
It is the language of a manager who is entirely out of their depth.
Totally.
Andy does not possess the strategic capability to help Carlos close the gap between $175K and $300K. A real manager, a competent one, would say, okay, we have a blind spot in their legal department. Let's map out an immediate strategy to get an audience with their general counsel this week.
Right, let's fix the process.
Exactly, let's unblock the deal. But Andy can't do that. So he resorts to brute force emotional manipulation. He is basically demanding that Carlos absorb the anxiety of the gap so that Andy's spreadsheet looks green when he reports to the VP.
Okay, let's trace the mechanics of what happens if Carlos actually caves to that pressure. Because it's so common. If Carlos says, fine, Andy, put me down for $300,000, Andy feels relief, right? The VP feels relief. Yeah. But what has actually occurred inside the company's operating system?
What's occurred is that they have just intentionally injected toxic data into the central nervous system of the company.
Just flat out poison.
It's poison. It's like the systemic failure we saw in the banking sector during the Wells Fargo cross-selling scandal.
Oh, right. The fake accounts.
Exactly. Executives set impossible quotas, managers bullied frontline workers to hit them, and the workers responded by opening millions of fake accounts.
Just to survive the day.
Right. And then the executives looked at the dashboards, saw massive growth, and made strategic decisions based on a reality that was entirely fabricated. If Andy forces Carlos to invent $125,000, and every other manager in that room does the exact same thing to their reps, that lie compounds. It rolls up into a massive, multi-million-dollar hallucination that eventually lands on the CEO's desk.
Which means the CEO is going to make irreversible capital allocation decisions based on Andy's inability to manage his own anxiety.
Yeah, precisely.
I mean, if you are managing human beings, forcing them to artificially inflate projections just to alleviate your stress isn't leadership. It is corporate sabotage. You are literally begging for a catastrophic systemic failure.
You are. And honestly, Carlos holds his ground, which is impressive.
It is.
But Carlos's situation exposes a fatal flaw in the system. When an organization visibly punishes honesty and rewards fiction, the smartest people in the room will stop fighting the system and they will start weaponizing it.
Which brings us to Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Kathleen is the apex predator of this broken ecosystem.
She really is.
She is a former Division League athlete, hyper-competitive, and clearly brilliant at reading the room. She doesn't just meet her quota, she steps to the podium and confidently forecasts over her quota. She calls $350,000.
And you can almost hear the collective sigh of relief in the room.
Oh, absolutely. The managers are so desperate for a win after Carlos that they completely drop their guard.
It's the ultimate confirmation bias. She delivers the adrenaline hit they were craving, and because she gives them the macro number they want, they subconsciously agree not to interrogate the micro details.
Right. They don't want to kill the golden goose.
Even if they secretly suspect the goose is a mirage.
Well, the sources outline exactly how she constructs this mirage, and it's fascinating. She relies on something called forecast filler.
A very common tactic.
Right. She has this one specific account, Thompson, that has been sitting on her active pipeline for 9 months. 3 quarters ago, she forecasted it at $200K. Last quarter, it decayed to $100K. Today, it's sitting at $50K.
Is a zombie deal.
A zombie deal. It is mathematically dead. It has no pulse. But it just keeps wandering around her spreadsheet, inflating her numbers just enough to keep management off her back.
The Thompson account is a perfect case study in the fundamental law of enterprise sales, which is time kills all deals.
Time kills all deals.
Always. If a project is constantly slipping from quarter to quarter and the scope of the project keeps shrinking, it is not a real opportunity. It is a symptom of a total lack of urgency. The customer has no compelling, quantified business reason to change their current state.
So why keep it on the board?
Because Kathleen doesn't want to admit she can't close it, right? That would hurt her ego. And the managers don't want to admit their pipeline is weak. So they enter into this unspoken pact to pretend the zombie is alive.
And when the managers actually do try to probe slightly, like they ask her why a different customer on her list needs to buy right now, she executes this masterful evasion.
It's so clever.
She completely ignores the business case and just starts rambling enthusiastically about how much the customer loved a random new product feature. She uses product excitement as a smokescreen to hide the complete lack of a commercial agreement.
It's brilliant misdirection because excitement is not revenue.
Right.
A user thinking a feature is cool does not translate into a CFO authorizing a 6-figure wire transfer. But because Kathleen is speaking with such energy and confidence, the managers just accept the misdirection.
See, the danger here isn't just the fake data there, it's the sunk cost. It's the cognitive burden of keeping the lie alive.
Yes.
I mean, it's like keeping a gym membership for 3 years that you literally never use, but you refuse to cancel it.
Oh, that's so true.
Every month you look at the charge on your credit card and you tell yourself, oh, I'm definitely going next week. You pay the monthly tax just so you don't have to face the painful psychological reality of admitting you failed at your fitness goal.
And the corporate equivalent of that monthly tax is opportunity cost.
Opportunity costs.
Think about it. If Kathleen is spending 20% of her mental bandwidth and administrative time just managing the Thompson zombie account.
Sending emails, updating the CRM.
Exactly. Sending follow-up emails that go nowhere, defending it in internal meetings. That is 20% of her capacity that is not being deployed to find a real customer with a real problem.
Wow.
So for you listening, the mandate is clear. You must develop the ruthless discipline to kill zombie projects, whether it's a sales deal, a product feature, or an internal initiative. If it is endlessly slipping, purge it. Cut the dead weight so you can focus your finite energy on what has actual traction.
And traction is the perfect segue because our next rep at the QBR, Hanlon, is the living embodiment of mistaking friction for traction.
Okay.
If Kathleen hides her lack of control behind zombie deals, Hanlon hides his book behind a sheer chaotic blur of motion.
Hanlon represents a trap that captures so many ambitious young professionals. It's the absolute conflation of activity with accomplishment.
Right. So Hanlon is the new guy. The sources describe him as coming from a Texas oil family, carrying a massive chip on his shoulder, and just desperate to prove himself. He is vibrating with energy.
So much energy.
He steps up and calls a massive $400,000 forecast. He claims he has 8 brand new deals closing simultaneously.
Which is huge.
Huge. But when you look at the underlying mechanics of how he plans to close them, it's a house of cards. His entire strategy relies on firing off responses to RFPs and initiating POCs.
RFPs being request for proposal and POCs being proof of concepts.
Right.
And in an enterprise environment, these are incredibly resource-heavy maneuvers. On the surface, to an unsophisticated manager, Hanlon looks like a prodigy.
He's doing so much.
He's generating a massive volume of pipeline. But the data provided in the sources paints a terrifying reality. Forgo's proof of concepts last an average of 4 weeks, yet they only yield a 25% win rate.
That's terrible.
And worst of all, Hanlon is initiating these month-long trials without ever defining the success criteria with the customer beforehand.
Okay, let's stop and unpack the true cost of that, though, because I think it's really easy to say, oh, a free trial, what's the harm?
Right.
If I'm a young professional, the dominant narrative out there right now is hustle culture.
Hustle grind, yeah.
Take massive action, move fast, break things, get your foot in the door at all costs. Hanlon is out there aggressively pushing the product into the hands of 8 different companies. Isn't that raw momentum better than sitting around analyzing an account for a month before acting? I mean, shouldn't we applaud that hustle?
It's a common defense, but that brings us right back to the difference between friction and traction.
Okay, lay that out for me.
Imagine a car stuck in deep mud.
Okay.
You floor the accelerator, the engine is screaming, the RPMs are redlining, the speedometer says you're doing 80 miles an hour, and mud is just spraying 50 feet into the air.
Sounds messy.
To an outside observer, there is an incredible amount of activity and energy. That is friction.
Oh.
But the car hasn't moved a single inch forward. Traction only occurs when the rubber actually grips the solid road beneath the mud and translates that engine energy into forward movement.
So Hanlon is just spinning his wheels.
Hanlon is generating massive friction. He's redlining the engine, but there is zero grip.
And the engine is going to overheat.
Exactly.
Think about the hidden burn rate of a 4-week proof of concept. It's not just Hanlon's time. He is dragging sales engineers into this.
Yes.
He is using cloud compute resources. He is pulling customer success managers away from actual paying clients to support a free trial for a prospect who hasn't even agreed to buy anything if the trial works.
It is the tragedy of the blind leading the blind.
Totally.
The customer is just clicking around the software without understanding its strategic capabilities. And Hanlon is hovering around them without understanding their core business needs. He is hoping that if they just play with the tool long enough, they will magically discover a reason to authorize a 6-figure purchase.
But hope, once again, is the only active strategy. So how do you fix it? How do you convert that friction into traction? What is the mechanical fix for Hanlon's approach?
You must establish a contract of expectations.
A contract of expectations.
Yes. Never engage in a trial, a proof of concept, or any major expenditure of company resources without mutually agreeing on the exact, measurable criteria for success before the work even begins.
Ah, that makes so much sense.
It requires a hard conversation. You have to look the client in the eye and say, if our platform demonstrates the ability to reduce your processing time by 15% within the next 14 days, do we have a mutual agreement that you will execute the enterprise license for $100,000?
And if they say no?
If the customer refuses to agree to those terms, they do not have a real problem to solve. They're just kicking the tires for fun, and you must walk away before they drain your resources.
Stop spinning the tires in the mud.
Exactly. Walk away.
Okay, so we have dissected 4 distinct archetypes of failure here at the rep level. Shannon refuses to run diagnostic tests. Carlos gets bullied into injecting fake data. Kathleen weaponizes zombie deals to evade scrutiny. And Hanlon redlines the engine with 0 traction.
The complete disaster.
But as this QBR drags on, the sources reveal a foundational rot beneath the floorboards. There is a systemic disease infecting all 60 people in this room that makes all of these individual failures possible. It is literally a Tower of Babel in the corporate world.
This is honestly the most insidious structural failure an organization can suffer, precisely because it is completely invisible to the people experiencing it.
It is a brilliant observation from the text, because everyone in this room is using the exact same vocabulary. You listen to the conversations, and they all sound like they are on the same page.
They nod, they agree.
Right. They talk about securing a champion. They talk about finding the economic buyer. They discuss gatekeepers and justification. The words are identical. But the terrifying realization is that no one in the company has ever written down a codified definition of what those words actually mean.
Exactly.
Every single person is operating on a totally subjective, personal dictionary.
And the implications of that are catastrophic.
How so?
Well, let's trace how this data corruption happens in real time.
Okay.
My manager asks a rep, do you have a champion for this account?
And the rep confidently replies, yes, absolutely.
Right. So the manager checks a box on their spreadsheet, feeling totally secure that the deal is protected. But let's look at the divergent definitions there.
Okay.
The manager believes a champion is a C-level executive with direct budget authority who is actively risking their own political capital to force this purchase through procurement.
That's a strong champion. But the rep defines a champion as a mid-level IT manager who really likes the user interface, answers emails within 10 minutes, and took them out for a beer last week, but has absolutely zero power to actually sign a contract.
Exactly. And the thing is, the rep isn't lying.
No.
The rep genuinely believes they are telling the truth based on their personal dictionary. But the conversation itself is a total illusion.
They are speaking entirely past each other.
Yes. The manager is now forecasting millions of dollars in revenue based on the assumption of executive sponsorship that simply does not exist.
I mean, this maps perfectly to the Mars Climate Orbiter disaster in the late 90s.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. NASA lost a $125 million spacecraft because one engineering team was calculating thrust in metric units.
Newtons, right.
And the other team was calculating it in imperial units, pound force.
Unbelievable.
The computer just saw the number 100 and executed the command. They were using the exact same data fields, but entirely different languages. The spacecraft entered the Martian atmosphere way too low and just completely disintegrated.
And that is exactly what is happening to Forgo's revenue model.
It's just burning up.
It's a flawless mechanical analogy. The data inputs look identical, but the underlying physics are violently mismatched.
Yeah.
This is why a codified common vocabulary is the absolute prerequisite for execution. You cannot assume that your team defines industry jargon the same way you do.
So what's the fix?
If you are a leader, your very first job is to build the dictionary. What exact measurable actions constitute a qualified lead? What specific organizational power must a person wield to be legitimately labeled a champion?
Write it down.
Write it down. If you do not enforce that shared language, your team isn't communicating. They are just making noise in a crowded room while the spacecraft burns up.
Wow. Which brings us to the climax of this disaster.
The rollout.
Right. We've seen the localized failures on the ground. We have bad data generated by fear, optimism, and semantic confusion. Now the QBR ends. The reps finally leave the room. And we get to see what happens when all this poison data flows upward. The sources refer to this as the blind roll-up.
The blind roll-up. This is the moment where localized incompetence mutates into a systemic existential crisis.
So the managers, they huddle in the corner of the conference room, and it turns into this bizarre, high-stakes bazaar.
Like flea market.
Exactly. They are horse trading numbers, arguing over whose spreadsheet is more delusional, trying to reverse engineer a forecast that just won't get them fired.
It's all self-preservation.
Some managers actively sandbag their reps' numbers, like slashing them by 50% just to build a safety net.
Right.
Other directors step in and bully the managers, forcing them to inflate the numbers back up to meet the board's expectations. It's a total manipulation of reality.
Entirely detached from the actual customers.
Finally, this Frankenstein's monster of a forecast, this number that has been sliced, padded, bullied, and guessed at, is printed out and lands right on the desk of Raj, the CEO.
And let's dissect Raj's psychology here and his structural dilemma. Because Raj is a brilliant technical founder.
He's an engineer.
He's a former engineer, an immigrant who built this product with his own two hands. His entire worldview is constructed on the scientific method and engineering principles.
Logic, data.
Exactly. He operates on the golden rule of systems, which is if you can't measure a variable, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, you cannot improve it.
Right.
But he is staring at a revenue organization that rejects the scientific method entirely. They are operating on gut feelings, folklore, and basically fabricated metrics.
And because he is the CEO, he is trapped in the ultimate executive catch-22.
Yes.
He cannot just reject the number because he has to make real-world capital allocation decisions based on it today.
This is the brutal math of a SaaS, software as a service operating model.
Let's get into that math.
SaaS companies live and die by cash runway and predictive metrics. Raj is looking at this massive revenue forecast. If he believes that number is real, he has to immediately start spending cash.
Right, because of the lag time.
Exactly. He has to hire dozens of new engineers today to build the features those new clients will demand tomorrow. He has to hire customer success teams to onboard them. He has to increase server capacity. He is spending real hard dollars today to support the phantom dollars promised tomorrow.
But if the sales team misses that forecast,
Which we know they will.
because it's built on Kathleen's zombies, Hanlon's friction, and Carlos's bullied data, the company's burn rate remains sky high while the revenue just flatlines.
And they run out of cash.
They burn through their venture capital, they can't raise another round, and the company just dies.
Yes. But look at the inverse scenario, which is equally terrifying.
Okay, what's the inverse?
Raj is a smart guy. Let's say he suspects the data is garbage.
He knows Andy is lying.
Right. He assumes the sales team is lying, so he plays it safe. He decides not to hire the engineers. He freezes the customer success headcount.
Makes sense.
But what happens if, by some absolute miracle of sheer luck, the sales team actually hits the number?
Oh, wow. Then they bring in hundreds of massive enterprise clients that the company literally does not have the infrastructure to support.
Exactly. The product crashes under the load. The onboarding process takes 6 months instead of 2 weeks.
And the clients get furious.
The new clients realize they've been sold vaporware, they break their contracts, they churn, the reputation of the company is permanently destroyed in the market, and
the company dies.
the company dies anyway.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It is the bullwhip effect applied directly to corporate strategy.
The bullwhip effect.
Yeah, a tiny miscalculation by a rep at the very bottom of the chain gets amplified by a manager, multiplied by a director, and by the time it hits the CEO, a 10% error has become a 100% variance that just destroys the entire supply chain.
Wow, you just cannot build a durable structure on a foundation of shifting mud. It honestly doesn't matter how brilliant Raj's product is or how beautiful the corporate branding is. The structural integrity of the business is fundamentally compromised.
Which is why accurate data is the oxygen of a scaling business.
Oxygen.
If you are a leader at any level, whether you are a line manager or the CEO, your primary fiduciary duty is to ensure the absolute integrity of the data coming from your front lines. You cannot build a strategy on top of comfortable fictions. You have to demand the friction of the truth.
Well, bringing this all together, we have journeyed through the anxiety-ridden, deeply flawed ecosystem of the QBR. We watched Shannon substitute hope for diagnostics.
Yep.
We saw Carlos punished for actually measuring reality. We saw Kathleen exploit the system's cowardice with her zombie deals. We watched Hanlon generate massive heat with zero forward movement.
Spinning those tires.
And we saw a management team completely abdicate their responsibility because they lacked the common language necessary to lead, which ultimately forced their CEO into a lethal game of blind man's bluff.
It's a tragedy. And if we synthesize all of these discrete failures into one unified insight, it is this. Scaling an idea, leading a team, or growing a business cannot rely on the art of hope.
Right.
A successful, durable organization must function exactly like a professional symphony orchestra.
I love this analogy. Break it down.
In an orchestra, you have a rigid, codified structure, which is musical notation.
Right.
Because every single person on that stage understands the exact definition of a quarter note or crescendo. They can read the exact same sheet music.
They have a shared dictionary.
Exactly.
Huh.
If the string section sounds terrible, the conductor doesn't stop and ask them how they feel about the music.
Are you optimistic about this movement?
Right. The conductor stops, points to measure 42, analyzes the exact mechanical failure, and fixes it so the team can play in perfect harmony.
Yeah.
Without that codified language and rigorous measurement, you don't have an orchestra. You just have 60 people in a room blowing into instruments, generating deafening noise.
Just chaos. Well, as we wrap up today's deep dive, Look at your own calendar. Think about the meetings you will be sitting in this week. Think about the projects you are reporting on or the team you are managing. Are you operating with a clear, measurable, diagnostic process?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It is. Are you asking the hard questions that risk temporary discomfort for long-term clarity? Or are you just playing a game of comfortable fictions, hoping the altimeter is wrong?
You know, the great irony of business is that we spend endless hours obsessing over our competitors.
Oh, always.
We analyze market share, we fret over macroeconomic trends, we build defenses against all these external threats. But the reality of this case study proves that the greatest threat to your success isn't the competition outside the building.
It's inside.
The greatest threat is the unasked questions, the untested assumptions, and the comforting lies sitting right across from you at your own conference room table.
Wow. Well, now that we've exposed exactly how the system breaks down and the deep psychological drivers that create these massive blind spots, next time we're going to explore the precise step-by-step framework required to rebuild it from the ground up.
We'll look at how to turn that chaotic room of hopeful talkers into a synchronized, predictable machine.
Until then, keep asking the hard questions. Have you ever, wanted something to be true so badly that you just completely ignored all the giant flashing red flags staring you right in the face?
Oh, man. Absolutely. I mean, we all do it, right?
Right. You know the feeling. You are looking at a situation, and deep down there is this little voice whispering that something is fundamentally wrong. But you shove it down.
Yeah, because confronting the alternative is simply too uncomfortable, or it's too messy.
Exactly. Or it requires way too much immediate work to fix. And, in the world of business, that wishful thinking actually has a name. It is called having happy ears.
Happy ears, yeah. And it's really the silent killer of companies, of careers, and of revenue.
It totally is. So today we are doing a deep dive into an absolute masterclass in self-deception and managerial complacency.
Which is always a fascinating thing to unpack.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
We are jumping right into a high-stakes quarterly business review, or QBR. We have this charismatic, highly competitive sales rep who manages to completely dazzle her manager with this bloated forecast.
All while utterly failing to realize that her deals were essentially dead on arrival.
Right. We are going to explore the visceral tension of a corporate interrogation where the truth is actively being hidden. And not out of malice, but out of a desperate institutional hope that fiction will somehow magically turn into fact.
Yeah. And just to give you a quick overview of what we are doing today, we are breaking down the story of Kathleen, who is this hyper-competitive sales rep, as she presents her pipeline during a really brutal forecast review.
And we're pulling this from some great sources. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Whether you are selling enterprise software, pitching a startup to venture capitalists, or just trying to manage teams' deliverables, understanding Kathleen's missteps will teach you how to ruthlessly qualify reality. You'll learn how to strip away comforting illusions and stop confusing superficial excitement with actual business commitment.
I love that. Qualify reality. That is such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So let's set the physical scene first, because the environment plays a huge role in the psychology of what happens here.
Oh, definitely. The atmosphere is everything.
Right. So we are in this massive conference room on the 57th floor of a corporate building. The views of the skyline are incredible, but nobody's looking out the window.
No one cares about the view today.
Not at all. The stakes are incredibly high. The executives, like the CEO, the CFO, they are sitting right there, silently watching. It is a QBR for a rapidly growing but currently struggling software company.
So the pressure is just immense.
The air in the room is thick. It is the kind of environment where the mood can shift from casual coffee chatter to the stillness of a graveyard the second the meeting officially starts.
Yeah, I've been in those rooms. It is terrifying. Every sales rep in that room knows they're about to be put under a white-hot spotlight.
Exactly. They have to stand at a podium in front of 60 peers, managers, and executives and publicly declare their forecast. They have to state on the record exactly how much money they are going to bring in this quarter.
There is absolutely nowhere to hide. You either have the numbers or you don't.
And in steps Kathleen. And Kathleen is not your average employee.
Not at all. She is a former Division A lacrosse player from Duke.
Which is huge.
Right. She set school records. She ran the 200 and 400 meters. She maintained a 4.0 academic record. I
Hmm.
mean, she physically and mentally embodies competition.
She sounds pretty intimidating, honestly.
She is. She is bubbly, she is hyper-confident, and she steps up to that podium with a massive smile, just completely unfazed by the tension in the room.
She is walking into a lion's den wearing a suit of armor made of pure confidence. So Kathleen's quota, her assigned target for the quarter, is $300,000.
Okay, solid number.
Right. Her manager, Jim, looks at her and asks the million-dollar question, what is your forecast this quarter?
And in an environment this tense, you would normally expect a rep to hedge a little bit.
Yeah, you would expect them to be cautious, maybe commit to 250,000 and say they are working on some upside.
Exactly. Manage expectations.
But Kathleen doesn't even blink. She immediately and confidently forecasts $350,000.
Wow. Over her quota.
Right. And the reaction in the room is instantaneous. A murmur goes through the crowd. The executives literally lean forward in their chairs. And Jim, her manager, he just visibly exhales.
He drops his guard completely.
He does. Instead of grilling her the way a manager typically would when a rep claims they're going to blow past their quota, Jim starts asking these soft, accommodating, almost helpful questions.
And the psychology of Jim in this moment is arguably the most critical piece of this entire puzzle.
I really want to dig into that. Why does he act like that?
Well, we have to look at the systemic pressure he is under. A whole company is struggling to hit its numbers, right?
Right. You mentioned the company was struggling.
Yeah, and the previous reps who presented earlier in the morning, they were either forecasting low or presenting these incredibly messy, complicated deals that sounded like they were falling apart.
Oh, so the room was just depressed before she walked in?
Exactly. The stress on Jim and the stress on the executives in the room is compounding by the hour. So when Kathleen projects this ultimate bulletproof confidence and forecasts $50,000 over her goal,
Jim just experiences a massive neurological wave of relief.
yes, he falls victim to confirmation bias. He desperately needs to believe her, because if she is telling the truth, his problem for the quarter is solved.
But wait, I am struggling to see why Jim's reaction is necessarily wrong here. I mean, if a top-tier, hyper-competitive rep walks in projecting 116% of their quota, shouldn't a manager be thrilled?
Well, on the surface, sure.
It sounds like exactly the kind of aggressive, winner-takes-all mindset you'd want in an enterprise sales environment. Like, shouldn't a high number trigger a celebration rather than a cross-examination?
I get why you'd think that. Ambition is wonderful, obviously, but consistently forecasting above quota without a historical track record of actually delivering those exact numbers, that is a massive glowing red flag.
A red flag, absolutely.
It creates what we can call a Potemkin village.
Oh, like the fake towns built just for show.
Exactly. A beautiful, impressive facade built entirely for show, with absolutely nothing of substance holding it up from behind. When a manager like Jim accepts a bloated forecast without subjecting it to riskless qualification, he is abandoning his primary duty.
Which is to audit reality, right?
Yes, to manage reality.
Yeah.
If he accepts that $350,000 number just because it sounds good and makes him feel better in front of the CEO, well, he reports that to the board of directors.
Exactly. And the board might authorize hiring decisions or marketing spend or strategic investments based on the belief that this $350,000 is guaranteed revenue.
Oh, wow. So if that number is built on hope rather than structural fact, the eventual collapse doesn't just hurt Kathleen's commission check, it damages the entire organization's cash flow and strategic planning.
It does. It's essentially organizational sabotage disguised as optimism. That is wild. It actually reminds me of a student confidently marching up to their professor on the first day of finals week.
Okay, yeah.
And the student just announces, "Professor, I am definitely going to get an A+ on this final exam." And the professor is so relieved by the student's confidence, so thrilled that they don't have to worry about this particular student failing and ruining the class average, that they do not even bother to check if the student actually did any of the prerequisite homework.
Or attended the lectures.
Exactly. Or even understands the basic concepts of the course. They just write down A+ in pencil, feel a sense of accomplishment, and move on to the struggling students.
That is a perfect analogy. Jim is so relieved that he completely forgets to check the homework.
Right.
And the institutional danger here is that Jim's silence validates Kathleen's delusion. By not questioning the number, Jim implicitly tells Kathleen, your strategy is sound, your deals are solid, keep doing what you were doing.
He is enabling the very behavior that is going to destroy his quarter.
Precisely. If you are sitting in Jim's chair right now, evaluating your own team, you cannot let a confident presentation pacify your critical thinking. You must drill down equally on good news and bad news.
Trust, but aggressively verify. I mean, if someone walks into a meeting and says they're going to crush their target, the immediate response shouldn't be a sigh of relief. It should be, show me the math.
Walk me through the exact structural mechanisms of how these deals are going to close.
Yes.
You cannot let the emotional comfort of a big forecast rob you of your duty to audit reality.
And the cascading effect of Jim's relief is that it allows Kathleen to present the actual deals supporting this house of cards without any real scrutiny.
Right, let's get into the deals.
This brings us to her first major account, a company called Aramark. She confidently tells Jim that she believes this deal will absolutely close within the current quarter.
Okay, so Jim asks her about it.
Yeah, Jim asks a standard baseline qualifying question. He says, why does the customer have to buy so quickly? Which is, I mean, it is the most basic question you can ask. To forecast a deal in a specific 90-day window, you have to know what is forcing the customer to act now instead of next year.
Exactly. What is the compelling event? But Kathleen's response is where the entire illusion starts to crack. She does not give a business reason.
What'd she say?
She doesn't talk about a return on investment or a critical operational deadline or a massive financial pain point that the customer is bleeding cash over. Instead, she smiles and says the customer raved so much about the latest feature release that they ended up having an hour-long discussion just about that specific functionality.
Oh, no. So she takes their eagerness to talk about the product as definitive proof that they are going to sign a contract this quarter.
Yes, and Jim completely misses the pivot.
Are you serious?
I am. He just nods, accepts that as a valid answer, and prepares to move to the next account on the spreadsheet.
That is crazy. We have to dissect the fatal flaw in Kathleen's logic here because it feels like the single most common trap in B2B sales and complex negotiations.
Oh, it absolutely is. Kathleen is fundamentally mistaking a customer's intellectual curiosity about a product feature for actual buying urgency.
Right.
She is trapped in what is known as the feature function trap. She is selling the shiny bells and whistles of her software.
She knows every technical spec, every integration point, every user interface upgrade.
But she has absolutely no idea why the customer needs to buy it.
Because she hasn't quantified the pain. She hasn't figured out what the lack of this software is costing Aramark on a daily basis.
Exactly. She doesn't know the business problem. And here is the brutal reality of corporate purchasing. C-level executives do not authorize massive six-figure checks because a software feature is cool or innovative.
Right. Mid-level users might love a feature. They might chat with you for an hour about it.
But they do not have the power to spend the company's money. Executives buy solutions to major quantified business problems. They buy risk mitigation, they buy revenue expansion, and they buy cost reduction.
That makes total sense. So because Kathleen is completely blind to the actual business problem Aramark is facing, she has zero leverage to drive a close date.
None.
Yeah.
She cannot go to the buyer and say, if you don't implement this by October 1st, you will lose another $50,000 in operational inefficiencies. She has nothing to compel them to act.
It is exactly like walking onto a dealership lot to test drive a luxury sports car.
Oh yeah, tell me.
You sit in the driver's seat, you rave to the salesperson about the incredible surround sound system, you run your hands over the hand-stitched leather seats, and you spend a full hour chatting with them about the horsepower, the aerodynamics, and the engine specs.
And you're just visibly vibrating with excitement.
Right, exactly. And the salesperson, suffering from terminal happy ears, runs back to the sales manager's office and says, we have got a guaranteed sale today. This person spent an hour raving about the engine.
But what the salesperson completely failed to ask is if you actually have the liquid capital to buy a six-figure sports car.
Right, or if your credit score is in the tank, or honestly, if you are just a massive car enthusiast killing time on a Tuesday afternoon while your sensible sedan gets an oil change down the street.
Exactly. Excitement is just an emotion. A transaction requires a business justification, budget allocation, and a compelling event.
So the takeaway here is that you have to brutally separate feature excitement from business urgency in your own pipeline.
Yes. If you cannot articulate the specific quantified business pain the client is suffering from and the literal financial cost to them of doing nothing, you do not have a deal.
You just have a conversation.
You have an intellectual exercise. You have to ask yourself, what happens to this company if they do not buy my product today?
And if the honest answer is nothing, they just go about their business as usual, then there is absolutely no reason for them to sign a contract this quarter.
They will delay, they will deliberate, and your forecast will crumble.
And Kathleen's lack of business acumen does not just stop at getting overly excited about product features, does it?
Oh no, it gets worse. Because she does not understand how to anchor a deal to a real business problem, she naturally loses complete and total control of the evaluation process in her next two deals.
Okay, this is where it gets really bad.
Yeah, this is where the transcript moves from naive optimism into genuinely alarming strategic blindness. She brings up her second deal, a $50,000 opportunity with a company called McCormick.
Right, McCormick.
She casually mentions to the room that she has only called on them once, one single meeting.
Just one.
But, she announces proudly, they have already asked for a proof of concept, a POC, and they handed her a predefined, fully written list of criteria for that technical test.
And she presents this to Jim as a massive, unmitigated win. She thinks this shows incredibly high buyer motivation.
She does. And this is a devastating moment in the QBR. Let's think about this logically. If you walk into an account for the very first time, and the evaluation criteria for a complex software purchase are already entirely written, documented, and handed to you on a silver platter.
You did not write them,
Yes.
which means someone else did. But wait, I want to explore the customer's mindset here. If a prospect hands you the criteria, couldn't it just mean they are highly organized?
I mean, in theory.
Like, maybe they did their own internal research, mapped out exactly what they need, and are just looking for a vendor who can check all the boxes. Why is that inherently a trap?
Because in enterprise software, unless the customer is literally building the technology themselves, they rarely possess the deep native expertise required to perfectly architect an evaluation process from scratch.
Okay, so they need help.
Right. They rely on industry experts. And who are those experts? The vendors. If you are just showing up for meeting number one and the criteria are already locked in, the customer didn't write those requirements in a vacuum. Your competitor wrote them.
The competitor who was sitting in that exact same conference room 3, 4, 5 months ago.
Exactly. We call this leading the witness. The competitor spent weeks helping the customer shape the evaluation criteria to perfectly match their own product's unique strengths.
Oh, that's smart. And sneaky.
Very. And while they do that, they simultaneously embed landmines, specific requirements, designed to highlight every single known weakness in your product.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Let's say your competitor has a proprietary native integration with a specific legacy database that McCormick uses, and they know your company relies on a clunky third-party workaround for that same database.
Okay.
They will convince the McCormick executives that native integration is a non-negotiable, mission-critical security requirement. They write it into the proof of concept criteria.
Wow, so by the time Kathleen shows up, the trap is already set and fully armed.
Exactly. So Kathleen isn't winning a deal at all. She is walking straight into a buzzsaw.
She is acting as what the industry calls cannon fodder or column fodder, right?
Yes, precisely. Corporate procurement rules often dictate that a company needs 3 competitive bids to prove they did their due diligence before signing a major contract.
So the customer has likely already mentally and emotionally decided to buy the competitor's product.
Oh, almost certainly. But they need Kathleen to submit a bid and go through the motions of the proof of concept simply to satisfy the procurement department's mandate.
So Kathleen is just providing a competitive price, quote, to justify the customer buying from the other vendor.
Yeah. She is about to burn dozens of hours of her company's technical resources doing a ton of free, highly complex work for a deal she has mathematically lost before she even shook hands with the client.
That is brutal. It is like she's playing a high-stakes game of poker, pushing all of her chips into the center of the table, but she doesn't realize the opponent wrote the rulebook, dealt the cards, and is currently looking at her hand in a mirror.
Yes.
And her manager, Jim, is just sitting next to her, cheering her on, completely oblivious to the fact that the game is rigged.
It is wild. And her utter lack of control is even more glaring, more explicitly obvious in her next deal.
Right, Air Products.
She brings up this account, Air Products. And she openly admits to the room standing at the podium that when she arrived for her physical meeting at their headquarters, she saw a competitor's sales rep sitting right there in the lobby.
Just physically sitting there, waiting to pitch? The tension in that lobby must have been suffocating.
And when Jim finally pushes back slightly and asks her about it, she admits she has absolutely no idea who that competitor is meeting with higher up in the company.
She has no idea.
None. Her only contact inside the account, the person she proudly refers to as her champion, simply told her not to worry about it.
Don't worry about the competition physically sitting in our lobby. Those are famous last words in any
It's
business.
truly. And this is the moment where the dynamic in the room shifts, because Andy jumps in.
Right. Tell us about Andy.
Andy is another manager in the room. He's much more cynical, much more experienced, and heavily driven by a sort of brute force realism. He doesn't suffer from Jim's need for comfort.
He's not looking for happy years.
Not at all. He calls this out immediately. He looks at Kathleen and asks, what happens if the competition is calling higher up in the account than you are? What if they are meeting with the CEO right now?
And what does Kathleen do?
She literally just shrugs.
She shrugs in a QBR, with the executive team watching.
I know.
It shows a complete disconnect from the strategic reality of the battlefield.
Because she genuinely has no answer. And this exposes a critical, fundamental misunderstanding of what a champion actually is.
Let's break that down.
Kathleen thinks she has a champion. What she really has is a low-level coach.
What's the difference?
A coach is someone who likes you. They might like your personality. They might love your product's features. They might give you some insider information of the company culture.
Okay.
But they have no real authority. They cannot secure budget. They cannot force a timeline. And crucially, they cannot block a competitor. A true champion has power and influence. A champion has direct access to the economic buyer, the person who actually signs the check.
So if her contact doesn't even know who the competitor is meeting with in the C-suite, or doesn't have the political capital to block the competitor from getting that meeting in the first place, her contact has zero power.
Precisely. If your contact says, don't worry, while the competition is actively in the building pitching to the executives, you should be absolutely terrified.
Right. You are entirely blind to the actual decision-making process. The competitor is upstairs talking about ROI and business impact with the CFO, while Kathleen is downstairs talking about user interfaces with a mid-level manager who has no checkbook.
Yes. So the golden rule of evaluations, the core lesson for anyone navigating a complex sale or a competitive pitch is this. If you did not help shape the customer's decision criteria, you are already losing.
You are playing someone else's game on their turf by their rules.
Exactly. Never blindly accept a predefined test, and never ever rely on a single low-level contact who tells you not to worry while the enemy is literally inside the gates.
You have to take control of the criteria. You have to test your champion's actual power by asking them for access to the economic buyer. Or you have to walk away and spend your time on a deal you can actually win.
And that ability to walk away from a bad deal is the hallmark of a mature professional.
Which Kathleen clearly lacks at this point.
Right. Kathleen's inability to do so leads us directly to the next phase of this disaster. We've seen her active delusions, how she pacifies her manager, how she mistakes feature curiosity for business urgency, and how she completely surrenders control to competitors.
But what happens to all these poorly qualified, out-of-control deals when they inevitably do not close at the end of the quarter?
They don't just disappear. They don't get deleted from the CRM system. They linger.
They become zombies.
Yes, they haunt the forecast, quarter after agonizing quarter. This brings us to the terrifying concept of the zombie pipeline.
Okay, let's talk about the zombies.
Kathleen presents a deal with a company called Thomson for $50,000. And this is where Andy, the cynical manager, finally hits his breaking point. He absolutely brutally calls her out, and interestingly, he directs his frustration not just at Kathleen, but right at Jim, her manager.
He points out the brutal mathematical history of this specific deal, doesn't he?
He does. He looks at Jim and says, she is forecasting Thomson again. This deal has been on the forecast for 9 months.
9 months.
He pulls up the historical data. 2 quarters ago, Kathleen confidently forecasted this exact same deal for $200,000. It didn't close.
Okay.
Last quarter, it mysteriously shrank to $100,000.
Right.
And she forecasted it again. It didn't close.
And now?
Now, we are in the current quarter. It has magically shrunk down to $50,000, and she is using it to prop up her current numbers.
It is shrinking and slipping, and Andy doesn't stop there. He points out another deal. Honeywell.
Right.
Kathleen had committed that deal last quarter for $150,000. It slipped in the final days of the quarter. And now she is using that delayed, highly unstable deal to pad her current $350K forecast.
The devastating truth is suddenly laid bare in front of the entire room. Kathleen's real, current, newly generated forecast isn't $350,000.
Her actual new pipeline deals she originated and qualified in the current period is practically non-existent.
Exactly. Her entire massive number is built on the rotting foundation of slipped deals and decaying opportunities from 9 months ago.
But why does this happen? Why do reps hoard these zombie deals? It seems like it would be more stressful to keep lying about them than to just admit they are dead.
Well, it is deeply rooted in the psychology of loss aversion and the mathematical pressure of pipeline coverage.
Explain that math to me.
Okay, so there are two immutable axioms in enterprise sales. Time kills all deals, and all bad deals die a slow death. Think about the metrics a rep is judged by. Most organizations require a rep to have 3 to 4 times their quota in pipeline coverage.
So if you need to close $300,000, you need $1 million in your pipeline.
Exactly. If Kathleen admits the $200,000 Thompson deal is dead and deletes it from her CRM, she doesn't just lose a deal. She loses $200K in pipeline coverage.
Which puts her in the red immediately.
Right. To replace that, she has to make hundreds of cold calls, send thousands of emails, and do hours of grueling prospecting work just to get her pipeline ratio back to healthy levels.
Oh, so it is mathematically and psychologically easier for her to shrink the deal by 50% every quarter and push the close date out another 90 days than to confront the brutal reality that the deal is dead.
Yes. She doesn't want to do the hard work of prospecting, and she definitely doesn't want to stand in front of Jim and admit she has a massive gap in her pipeline.
It is the fear of the zero. They would rather present a fake $50,000 and deal with the consequences later than present a real zero today.
Exactly. It is essentially kicking the can down the road, hoping a miracle happens.
But we also have to analyze Jim's catastrophic failure here as a leader. Why has Jim accepted the Thompson deal on his forecast for 3 consecutive quarters without demanding a forensic audit of why it keeps slipping?
Well, because Jim is conflict averse.
Right. He wants everyone to get along, he wants the QBR to go smoothly, and he doesn't want to engage in a tense, confrontational teardown of his star rep's pipeline in front of the CEO.
Exactly. By accepting these zombie deals quarter after quarter, Jim is actively avoiding the short-term interpersonal pain of conflict with Kathleen. But by avoiding that short-term pain, he is absolutely guaranteeing the long-term catastrophic pain of missing his revenue targets.
Because when those zombie deals inevitably fail to close again, the company misses its numbers, the stock drops, and people lose their jobs.
Right. It's systemic.
You know, I think about the zombie pipeline like keeping a pair of jeans in your closet that haven't fit you in 5 years.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
You know exactly the ones I'm talking about. They're tucked in the back. Maybe they still have a tag on them, or maybe they are from your college days.
Yeah, we all have those.
Every single year, you look at them and tell yourself, I am going to fit into those again by summer. I'm going to start running. I'm going to change my diet. But you never do.
Never.
They just take up physical space in your closet, and worse, they create a false sense of reality in your mind about your wardrobe. You think you have pants to wear, but you don't.
You're just holding on to the idea of them.
Right. At some point, if you want to actually look good and function in the real world, you have to brutally confront reality, throw those jeans away, and buy clothes that actually fit the reality of your body today.
I love that. The zombie deals are taking up mental space, they're taking up forecast space, and most importantly, they are preventing the rep from doing the hard, necessary work of prospecting for new, real business.
And they pollute the company's data too, don't they?
Absolutely. Marketing looks at the CRM, sees these massive deals lingering, and thinks they are targeting the right profiles. Product teams look at the features these zombie accounts requested and prioritize their roadmap incorrectly. The rot spreads through the whole organization.
So the practical takeaway here is all about rigorous pipeline hygiene. You must ruthlessly purge your pipeline.
Recondo your CRM.
Yes. If an opportunity doesn't spark joy, or, more accurately, if it doesn't have a clear economic buyer, a quantified business pain, and absolute urgency, throw it out.
If an opportunity keeps shrinking in value, and the decision date keeps pushing back in time without a concrete, documented reason, it is dead. A smaller, highly accurate pipeline of real deals is infinitely more valuable and more actionable than a massive, fictional pipeline full of zombies.
We have covered a massive amount of ground here.
We really have.
We have looked at the psychology of the overforecast and how it disarms managers. We have explored the feature function trap and the failure to anchor to business pain. We have seen the complete loss of control when dealing with predefined criteria and competitor landmines, and we just dissected the systemic rot of the zombie pipeline.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. So let's work together to synthesize all these threads into one defining insight. What is the fundamental core of Kathleen's failure?
If we synthesize everything we've discussed, it comes down to a single, devastatingly true maxim in business. Hope is not a strategy, and activity is not accomplishment.
Hope is not a strategy, and activity is not accomplishment. That perfectly encapsulates the entire QBR.
It does. Kathleen's entire $350,000 forecast was built purely on hope.
She was hoping that Aramark's excitement over a shiny new feature would magically translate into sudden buying urgency.
Right. She was hoping that McCormick, handing her a predefined proof of concept, was a genuine buying signal rather than a competitor's carefully laid trap.
She was hoping that her low-level contact at Air Products could somehow protect her from the competitor sitting in the lobby.
And she was desperately hoping that dead, decaying zombie deals like Thompson would somehow resurrect themselves just in time to save her quarter.
She was confusing the activity of having meetings with the accomplishment of securing commitments.
Exactly. And as we know, the universe rarely rewards pure, unverified hope in business. The market is brutally efficient at punishing self-deception.
So let's give the listener the final reality check. Bring in the cold, hard facts from the post-mortem in the source material. How did this specific quarter actually end for Kathleen? Did the sheer force of her confidence make any of it a reality?
It did not. The reality check is absolute. Kathleen stood at that podium in front of her peers and executives and confidently forecasted $350,000.
And
When the quarter actually ended 11 weeks later, she only closed $150,000.
wow, less than half.
She missed her target entirely. Her Potemkin village collapsed exactly as Andy predicted.
And that Thompson deal, the zombie deal she had been dragging along for 9 agonizing months, shrinking it from $200K down to $50K just to keep it on the board.
It slipped yet again. It vanished into the ether, never to return.
From a bulletproof forecast of $350K down to a dismal $150K. It just shows how devastating happy years are when the rubber finally meets the road and the quarter actually closes.
Yeah, it's a harsh wake-up call.
But I don't want to leave this deep dive on a note of total despair. Because Kathleen's story doesn't end with her being fired or failing permanently, right? Was she doomed forever to be a victim of her own wishful thinking?
No, and this is the vital, redemptive arc of the material. Kathleen is a phenomenal competitor. She has the drive, the work ethic, and the intelligence.
Which we knew from her sports background.
Right. Her problem wasn't a lack of talent. It was a lack of execution framework. Once she was finally coached properly, once she learned to stop relying on hope and started doing the exhausting, rigorous work of finding actual, quantified business pain.
Finding the pain above the noise,
Yeah.
getting out of the feature woods and into the executive suite.
Yes, exactly. Finding the critical existential issues that C-level executives actually care about, rather than just chatting about UI features with mid-level managers. She learned to map the organization, to demand access to the economic buyer, and to walk away from rigged evaluations.
And did it work?
It did. Once she made that structural shift in her approach, she transformed completely. Later in the source material, it's revealed that she applied these exact hard lessons and eventually closed the single biggest deal of her entire life for $1.15 million.
That is an incredible trajectory from missing a basic $300K quota and getting called out in a QBR to closing over $1 million in a single perfectly executed deal.
It's a huge turnaround.
The transformation is absolutely possible, but the prerequisite is that you have to face reality first. You have to take off the rose-colored glasses, kick the zombies out of your pipeline, stop letting hope drive your strategy, and do the hard work of qualification.
You have to become a ruthless auditor of your own reality.
Kathleen's story shows us the immense danger of living in a comfortable illusion, of wanting something to be true so badly that you ignore the giant flashing red flags. It is a powerful lesson in the necessity of friction and truth-telling in business. But it leaves me thinking about the exact opposite extreme. What happens when you strip away the illusion, but you replace it not with strategic rigor, but with pure, unadulterated, chaotic activity?
Well, that's a whole other problem.
Right. What happens when a rookie decides that if they just run fast enough, if they make enough cold calls, send enough desperate emails, and log enough hours, they can essentially force the universe to give them a win through sheer brute force volume? Keep pondering that, because the line between highly productive hustle and absolute burnout-inducing self-destruction is incredibly thin.
Imagine a really high-stakes corporate conference room.
Oh, yeah.
You're on, like, the 57th floor of this massive Manhattan skyscraper. The view is incredible, looking right out over the Hudson River.
But nobody's actually looking out the window right now.
Exactly. Nobody's looking at the view. The air in this room is so thick with tension, you could basically cut it with a knife. You've just got the hum of the projector fan, the clicking of really expensive pens, and, the nervous shifting of bodies in these ergonomic chairs.
It's a pressure cooker.
It is. Millions of dollars are on the line, and careers are literally hanging in the balance. But the crazy thing is, everyone in this room is essentially playing a massive collective game of make-believe.
Yeah, it's the ultimate corporate theater. I mean, what you're describing is the quarterly business review or the QBR.
Right.
And if you've ever wondered why these seemingly successful, heavily funded companies just suddenly hit a wall and collapse, the answer is usually sitting right there in that room. Because the QBR is very often where the truth just goes to die.
The truth goes to die. I mean, that is a terrifying thought for any investor, or really any employee.
Oh, absolutely.
So welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into the hard-won insights from John McMahon's book, The Qualified Sales Leader.
It's such a crucial text.
It really is. We are specifically zeroing in on Chapter 3, which covers the dynamics that can just destroy companies from the inside out. We're going to explore why startups stall out, why incredibly talented managers completely fail when they get promoted, and how treating business growth as a measurable science can completely transform an organization.
And I think it's important to note, this matters deeply even if you never plan on carrying a sales quota. Like, even if you never sit in a QBR in your life.
Right, totally, because it's about human psychology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether you're interested in leadership or entrepreneurship or just understanding the psychology of persuasion, the dynamics at play here govern almost every human interaction where, someone is trying to convince someone else to take action. Yeah, we're breaking down that messy transition from being a solo contributor who just relies on brute force to becoming a true leader operating with actual playbooks.
That's a huge shift.
It is. And our primary setting for this whole exploration is this fictionalized, fast-growing tech company called Forgo. So Forgo is going through some major growing pain.
Massive growing pains.
And we drop right into their QBR. So let's really set the stage for how this looks. Picture a podium. Sitting out in the audience are 60 of your peers.
Just staring at you.
Right, just staring.
Yeah.
And in the front row is this sort of tribunal. You've got CEO Raj, the CFO, and the Chief Product Officer. And one by one, these sales reps have to stand up under the fluorescent lights and publicly declare exactly what deals they're going to close this quarter.
It's completely anxiety-inducing by design. I mean, you have frontline managers sitting there, rubbing their pens, and they're just waiting to carve up a rep's forecast in front of the executives.
Just to prove they're tough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, to show dominance. But the fatal flaw of this entire exercise is that the questions the managers are asking are almost entirely superficial.
Like what? What are they asking?
Well, they're asking things like, when is it going to close? Or how much is the total contract value?
Which sounds important.
It sounds important, but they are completely failing to dig into the root reality of the account. I mean, they're treating the symptoms, not diagnosing the actual disease.
Wow. Okay. And we see this play out so perfectly through 4 specific archetypes of sales reps who stand up at that podium.
Oh.
And reading this, I mean, these are reps that exist in literally every single company on Earth.
Oh, 100%. You will recognize these people immediately.
Totally. So let's start with Shannon. Shannon is tough, she's confident, and she is suffering from a terminal case of what the book calls happy ears.
Ah, happy ears. It's so dangerous.
So dangerous. She stands up and she projects this $250,000 deal with a major financial institution. And then she casually drops that she has a quote-unquote shot at making it $300,000.
Ah, just dangling that carrot.
Exactly. Now, if I'm a manager listening to that, I'm thrilled, right? Because more money is always better.
Well, on the surface, yes. But then the tribunal starts asking basic logistical questions.
Right.
And Shannon admits she only has a single contact at this massive financial institution. And when they ask her when she last spoke to this supposedly crucial contact, she admits it's been, like, 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah. And to top it all off, she claims there is zero competition looking at the deal.
Which is just absurd, right? Like, a major bank isn't going to drop $250,000 on a new software platform without looking at least 3 other vendors.
No, it violates every single procurement rule in the corporate world. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you can't just bypass legal and IT security.
Precisely. I mean, a $250,000 deal does not happen in a vacuum. The competition is going to notice. And it certainly doesn't advance when the sales rep hasn't even spoken to the buyer in a week and a half.
Right. In enterprise sales, 10 days of silence isn't just a pause.
No, it's a death knell. It means your deal has been completely deprioritized.
But the managers back off. Like,
Yeah.
That's the crazy part to me. Because Shannon dangles that $300,000 hope, the managers just accept her flimsy answers.
Yeah, they want to believe her.
They want to believe it so badly because they need her number to make their own spreadsheet look good.
And that is the really insidious nature of happy ears. It's contagious. The rep wants to believe the deals is closing, so they literally only listen for good news.
Right.
And then the manager wants to believe the rep, so they actively choose not to interrogate the bad news. It's this shared delusion.
A shared delusion, man. Which brings us to the polar opposite archetype. Carlos.
Carlos is fascinating.
He really is. He's a former college football player.
Yeah.
Very intense, very guarded. He is the classic sandbagger.
Yeah.
So his quota for the quarter is $300,000, but he stubbornly refuses to forecast a single penny over $175,000. And the managers are up there practically bullying him at the podium, demanding he commit to his full quota.
And notice the dynamic here, though. The managers aren't actually helping Carlos figure out how to build his pipeline.
No, they're just yelling at him.
Exactly. They are just demanding he change the number on the spreadsheet to make the collective total look better for CEO Raj. But Carlos just refuses to budge.
You won't do it.
Right, because he knows exactly what he doesn't know about his accounts. He knows which deals are actually real and which ones are still in that early, fuzzy discovery phase.
I have to say, part of me really respects Carlos. Like, he isn't playing the game. He's looking his manager in the eye and essentially saying, I am not going to lie to you just to make you feel comfortable.
Carlos actually represents a rep who is very much in control of his reality.
Really? Even though he's under forecasting?
Yeah, because sandbagging is often just a defense mechanism against incompetent management. Think about it. If Carlos knows his manager is just going to blindly double whatever number he gives them,
Oh, wow, right.
then Carlos will intentionally cut his real number in half just to protect himself from the fallout.
That makes so much sense. But it creates this incredibly toxic adversarial relationship between the rep and the manager.
Absolutely toxic. It's completely dysfunctional.
Which perfectly transitions us to the master of the toxic relationship, but she hides it behind a smile. Kathleen.
Ah, Kathleen.
So Kathleen is a former Division I athlete, incredibly charming, super bubbly, and she stands up and promises this massive $350,000 quarter. The executives completely eat it up. They love her energy.
They do, but if you look closely at her pipeline, it's a house of cards.
Yeah.
She is heavily relying on what the book calls forecast fillers.
Right, specifically this one massive deal, the Thompson deal.
The zombie deal.
Zombie deal. I love that term.
It's so accurate, though. The Thompson deal has been rolling over from quarter to quarter for 9 months. Literally every time the end of the quarter approaches, the deal mysteriously slips to the next month.
And the projected dollar amount slowly shrinks too, right? It's a zombie. It is completely dead. There is no pulse, no momentum whatsoever, but it just keeps shambling along on her spreadsheet. But wait, why would a rep do this? Like, why not just close it out as a loss and move on to real deals?
A couple of reasons. First, the sunk cost fallacy. She's put so much time into it. But second, and more importantly, it acts as a phenomenal distraction.
How so?
Well, as long as Kathleen has a $150,000 deal sitting on her forecast, her manager, Jim, kind of leaves her alone.
Oh, because it props up his numbers.
Exactly. Jim does not want to dig into the Thompson deal because if he actually proves it's dead, he has to subtract $150,000 from his own forecast.
So he just ignores the smell of the rotting corpse on the spreadsheet.
That's exactly it. Kathleen uses her bubbly personality to essentially hypnotize Jim into ignoring reality.
That's wild. The manager is actively complicit in the deception because the actual truth is too painful for his own quota.
Yep. It's a system built on avoiding pain.
Okay, let's look at the final archetype. This guy doesn't have Kathleen's political savvy at all. Hanlon, the naive rookie.
Poor Hanlon.
Right. Endless energy. He's the kind of guy who's at his desk at 6 a.m. and leaves at 8 p.m., and he forecasts $400,000 based on sheer, unadulterated hope.
Hanlon is the classic example of confusing motion with progress.
Yes.
He stands up at the QBR and brags about how many blind RFPS requests for proposals he's answered this quarter.
And just for context for you listening, an RFP is basically this massive, tedious questionnaire that a company sends out to vendors when they want to buy something.
Right. It's a massive document, and Hanlon is spending hours and hours filling out these documents without ever actually speaking to the customer who wrote it.
Which is just crazy.
It is. And on top of that, he's relying heavily on proof of concepts, or POCs. He runs these trials for 4 weeks at a time. He just gives the customer the software, sets it up, and hopes they like it enough to buy it.
And you highlighted the fatal flaw with Hanlon's strategy when we were prepping for this deep dive.
Yeah.
His win rate on those POCs is only 25%.
It's terrible.
Think about the burn rate there. He is consuming massive amounts of company time, server space, and technical support resources, just hoping a customer will magically decide to write a check.
Yeah, because he never defines what success actually looks like before starting the trial. He's literally just throwing spaghetti at the wall.
So let's pause and look at the aggregate picture of this QBR room. You have Shannon inflating numbers with happy ears. You have Carlos hiding numbers to protect himself. You have Kathleen manipulating numbers with zombie deals. And Hanlon projecting numbers based on pure fantasy.
And that mess is the raw data being fed to the management team.
Okay, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Listening to Shannon pad her numbers, or Kathleen use a zombie deal to keep her boss off her back, isn't that just basic human nature?
Sure, self-preservation.
Right. If you put people in a terrifying public forum with their jobs on the line, of course they're going to tell their boss what they want to hear. So why is this specific boardroom theater so uniquely disastrous for a company?
That is the most important question to ask. And it brings us to this core concept of the roll-up.
Okay, the roll-up.
It's disastrous because of the cascading failure it creates at the executive level. Look, the frontline managers at Forgo don't actually know the ground truth of these accounts.
Because they aren't asking the hard questions.
Exactly. They aren't asking the deep, uncomfortable, qualifying questions. So when the QBR ends, those managers go into a closed-door meeting. They sit around a table, look at the numbers provided by Shannon, Carlos, Kathleen, and Hanlon, and they literally just guess.
They guess. The managers whose entire job description is to predict revenue just start making arbitrary adjustments.
Yes. They argue with each other. They discount Shannon's number by 20% because they know she's too optimistic.
Right.
They arbitrarily inflate Carlos by 30% because they know he sandbags. They leave Kathleen alone because they like her. And then they roll up this totally flawed Frankenstein number to the vice president of sales.
And the VP of sales, who is even further removed from the actual customer, looks at that Frankenstein number, applies their own completely subjective gut feeling discount, and rolls it up to the chief revenue officer.
Who then rolls it up to CEO Raj.
It's like a game of telephone, but with millions of dollars.
Exactly. And Raj has to take that complete work of fiction and commit to it with the board of directors.
Oh, man.
This creates a lethal catch-22 for a CEO. Let's look at the math here.
Okay, walk me through it.
If the forecast is falsely inflated thanks to the unchecked happy ears of Shannon and Kathleen, Raj looks at the projection and says, wow, we are going to close $5 million this quarter. I need to hire 10 new customer success reps and 5 new engineers to support all this growth.
Right, because if you sell the software, you need people to implement it. So Raj spends the venture capital money hiring those people.
But the growth isn't real. The deals slip. The revenue doesn't arrive. Suddenly, Raj has a massive payroll, an exploding burn rate, and no cash coming in.
And the company goes bankrupt?
Yep.
But wait, let's look at the flip side. What if Raj knows the sales team is full of it? What if he assumes they're all sandbagging like Carlos?
Right.
Or he just fundamentally doesn't trust the inflated numbers, so he decides not to hire the support staff?
Well, that's the other side of the catch-22. If Raj plays it safe and doesn't hire the implementation teams, but the sales team actually does manage to close those deals.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. Now, Forgo has millions of dollars in new customers who expect immediate service, but there is literally no one there to onboard them.
So the product crashes, the customers churn, the company's reputation is destroyed in the market, and they fail anyway.
It's flying a plane completely blind. Raj has his hands on the yoke, but his instruments are feeding him random data generated by the emotional insecurities of a dozen different people.
Wow. So if the data is this bad, where's the filter actually breaking down? Because the reps are just acting like reps, and the CEO is trapped, so it has to be the frontline managers.
It is entirely the managers, which requires us to look at the root cause of Forgo's dysfunction. Forgo is suffering from a very specific type of growing pains.
What kind of growing pains?
Well, they originally evolved by selling a simple, relatively cheap software feature to a single, low-level user. It was highly transactional.
Right. Easy to sell, fast cycle.
Exactly. But now they're trying to sell a complex, expensive software platform to C-suite executives. The game entirely changed. The stakes got much higher, but the managers are still trying to use the old transactional playbook.
They are completely out of their depth. So let's look at the two manager archetypes we meet in this scenario, because I think you listening have probably worked for one of these two guys at some point.
Oh, without a doubt.
First, you have Andy. Andy is an ex-athlete from Southie in Boston. He had a tough working-class upbringing. His pro baseball career ended in an injury. And he basically approaches management through sheer, unadulterated brute force.
Yeah, Andy masks his own deep confusion about the complex enterprise sales cycle by being a tough, impatient interrogator.
He just yells, basically.
Pretty much. When he looks at a rep's pipeline and sees the numbers are low, he doesn't know how to diagnose the structural problem in the deal, so his only answer is to yell, work harder, make more calls, send more emails.
He just leads through pure intimidation.
Right.
And then you have his counterpart, Jim. Jim was a college hockey captain. He is a natural team builder. Everyone loves him. He wants to create this incredibly positive, supportive culture. But Jim is fundamentally just trying to win a popularity contest.
And when a manager's primary goal is to be everyone's friend, they inevitably avoid asking the tough, uncomfortable questions that actually hold their reps accountable.
Right, like with Kathleen.
Exactly. Jim will look at Kathleen's Zombie Thompson deal, and rather than confronting her and demanding proof that the deal is actually alive, he just smiles and says, keep at it, I believe in you.
So they are both failing, just in entirely different directions. Andy and Jim are both acting as what the book calls glorified scorekeepers.
Glorified scorekeepers. It's a great phrase.
They're obsessively tracking the metrics of activity. You know, how many calls did you make today? How many emails did you send? How many demos did you run? They're confusing activity with accomplishment.
And that is a crucial distinction in any business. I mean, tracking activity is easy. It requires zero intellectual effort.
You just look at the dashboard.
Exactly. But a glorified scorekeeper never stops to inspect why a deal is actually advancing or why it stalled out, telling a struggling rep to just sell more or make more calls without diagnosing their specific skill gap is completely useless.
There's this analogy in the text that just perfectly captures the absurdity of Andy's management style, the drowning man.
Yes, I love this one.
Break it down for us.
So imagine you're standing on the deck of a ship and you see a man in the water, drowning, just thrashing around. Andy's approach to management is leaning over the rail and screaming, swim! Hey, you need to swim harder, tread water!
A guy drowning knows he needs to swim. Motivation is not his problem here.
No, survival instinct is providing plenty of motivation.
Right. What he lacks is the technique, the buoyancy, the knowledge of how to actually cup his hands and kick his legs. Yelling at him doesn't teach him the mechanics of swimming. It just makes him panic more before he finally goes under.
Exactly. A true manager would throw him a life preserver, pull him out of the water, and teach him the stroke mechanics. But Andy and Jim don't know the stroke mechanics themselves, so they just keep yelling from the deck.
That is such a vivid picture of bad management.
It really points to a profound psychological shift that has to happen when someone moves from being a top-performing individual contributor into a management role.
The mindset shift required is just massive.
Yeah.
There's this brilliant conversation that happens in the book when they are driving in a car in Houston with Hanlon, our rookie rep.
Yeah, that's a pivotal scene.
It perfectly captures why great reps often make terrible managers. The analogy is that being a sales rep is a lot like being single.
Think about your life when you're single and living alone. Your world revolves entirely around you.
Totally. You wake up when you want, you eat what you want.
Right, you organize your schedule to maximize your own productivity. In sales, your pipeline, your quota, your paycheck, It's all about you. You are highly motivated, but it is a strictly self-centered motivation. You are the hero of your own story.
Right. If you want to work until midnight to close a deal and buy a new car, you just do it. But being a manager, becoming a manager is exactly like having kids.
It is an absolute identity shift. Suddenly, it's not about you anymore. You are no longer the hero. You are the guide.
Yeah.
Your entire world has to revolve around their success. When do your kids need to eat? What do they need to learn today to survive tomorrow? How do you provide them with the tools they need to actually thrive?
So Andy and Jim were fundamentally still acting like single guys who just happened to have a bunch of kids dropped into their laps.
Precisely. They were still trying to be the super rep, the alpha dog swooping in to save the day, rather than doing the quiet, tedious, selfless work of actually developing the people under them.
But to develop people, you can't just rely on good intentions. You need a system. Scale requires structure.
Yes, it does.
You cannot run a global enterprise relying on the individual instincts of 50 different reps. Think of a symphony orchestra. You have 60 highly talented musicians sitting on a stage. If there's no sheet music and everyone just starts playing whatever melody they feel like playing, the result isn't music.
No, it's unbearable noise.
Exactly. The sheet music provides a common vocabulary. If the sales team has no shared vocabulary, like if Shannon says, I have a champion on this deal, and she means a mid-level IT guy who thinks she's funny, but Carlos says, I have a champion, and he means the CEO who actually controls the budget, then managing them is impossible.
Because champion means two completely different things in that scenario.
Right. Winning just becomes a stroke of blind luck. You cannot analyze or improve a symphony if there are no notes on the page.
And in the science of the sales process, the first movement of that symphony, like the very first note on the page, is discovery.
Discovery.
This is where most reps fail before they even begin. They engage in a behavior we call show up and throw up.
Vending instead of selling.
Precisely. They get a meeting with a prospect, they open their laptop, and they just start vomiting a list of product features. Look at our new dashboard. Look at this integration. Look at how fast the software runs.
They were just hoping the customer will magically connect one of those features to a problem they have.
Right, but the rep hasn't actually done the work to find the customer's pain, and not just any pain, because this is where the nuance is really critical.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, you guys.
There's this concept of getting above the noise that completely reframed how I look at business problems. Think of a forest ranger.
Okay, a forest ranger.
A forest ranger overlooks millions of acres of land from a watchtower. Every single day, campers leave small campfires smoldering.
Sure.
But the ranger does not have the resources, the helicopter fuel, or the time to fly out and put out every single tiny campfire. Some fires, they just let burn. It's a calculated risk.
Wow, okay.
Their actual job is to scan the horizon for the massive raging infernos, the crown fires that threaten to burn down the entire forest, destroy the town, and end livelihoods.
Now map that to a corporate environment. Every business, every hospital, every bank has hundreds of tiny fires, small inefficiencies, minor annoyances, clunky software.
Right.
If a rep tries to sell a solution to a small campfire, the mid-level managers might care, but the C-suite, the executives who write the big checks, they're going to completely ignore it. They're busy looking at the infernos.
Reps have to get above the noise to find that C-level pain. And in the corporate world, those infernos usually fall into 4 specific categories: regulation, revenue, cost and profitability, or risk.
That makes total sense.
If your solution doesn't help the company comply with a new law, massively increase their revenue, slash their operating costs, or mitigate a catastrophic risk, you are not getting the big budget. You are just a nice-to-have feature.
So step 1, find the big fire. Find the inferno. But that isn't enough, right? Once you find the pain, you have to do what the book calls scoping, or implicating the pain.
Yes.
And there is a story in the source material about a life insurance salesman named Dan that just blew my mind. It perfectly illustrates what it means to actually implicate pain.
It's one of the most powerful narratives on the psychology of sales I've ever read.
It's intense.
Dan is selling life insurance, which is the ultimate commodity. I mean, there's virtually no feature differentiation between his policy and the policy offered by a dozen other companies.
Right. It's just a payout.
But Dan doesn't sell features. He doesn't talk about premiums or payout structures. Dan sells pure urgency.
He calls up a prospect, often late at night, and asks this incredibly blunt, almost shocking question. What happens if you box up tomorrow?
Yeah. Meaning, what happens if you die tomorrow and they put you in a pine box in the ground?
I mean, it sounds aggressively morbid.
It does, but look at the psychological mechanics of what Dan is actually doing. He is forcing the prospect to vocalize the devastating negative consequences of their current uninsured state. He doesn't say, my insurance pays out $500,000. He asks, if you box up tomorrow, will your wife have to go back to work? Will she have to pull the kids out of their school? Will the bank foreclose on the house because she can't pay the mortgage on a single income?
I mean, I'm getting stressed just hearing those questions. It feels incredibly manipulative on one hand, using the fear of death, but on the other hand, it's the absolute truth of the situation.
And that is the whole point. He isn't inventing a fear. He is exposing a reality the prospect has been actively avoiding.
Right, the status quo.
Exactly. He traps the prospect in their own reality. He creates this absolute immediate urgency. The prospect suddenly realizes that doing nothing, the status quo, is actually a highly dangerous, irresponsible decision.
That is implicating pain. Dan never even pitched his product. He just made the pain of the status quo so agonizingly unbearable that the prospect basically begs for a solution.
And that urgency, that unbearable pain of the status quo is the fuel you need to drive the rest of the process. Because as they say, time kills all deals. If you don't have urgency, the deal will stall out in legal or procurement forever.
So let's break down the logic chain here. Because it's not random. It is a very specific sequence of events that leads to a closed deal.
It's a strict chronological chain. First, you find the pain. Second, you quantify that pain in actual dollars and cents.
Like, how much is this problem costing you?
Right. Third, you implicate the pain to create urgency, like Dan did. Fourth, that urgency allows you to recruit a champion. Fifth, that champion gets you access to the economic buyer. And finally, the economic buyer is the one who actually releases the major funds.
Okay, we need to pause and define our terms very carefully here, because this is exactly where the shared vocabulary of the symphony orchestra breaks down. Reps constantly confuse a coach with a champion.
All the time.
Janet thought she had a champion. What is the actual difference?
The difference is power. A coach is someone inside the company who likes you. They like your product, they'll answer your phone calls, they'll give you inside information about the company politics, they're friendly. But a coach does not have structural power.
A champion, on the other hand, actually has the juice.
Exactly. They have the power and influence to force a change within their organization. They have political capital. And crucially, they're willing to spend that capital on you.
But why? Why would an executive stick their neck out for a software vendor?
Because solving the business pain helps them personally. A true champion is acting in their own rational self-interest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, maybe bringing in your software solves a massive inefficiency that gets them promoted to VP. Maybe it hits a metric that triggers a massive end-of-year bonus. Their personal success is inextricably linked to your solution being implemented.
But this brings up a huge operational problem. If I'm a sales rep, how do I actually know if the person I'm talking to is a champion or just a really friendly coach who's leading me on?
You have to test them.
Because people like Kathleen rely on mid-level managers who say, "Don't worry, Kathleen, I've got this." How do you test them without insulting them?
Well, you have to push them. You have to manufacture friction.
Okay, how?
There's a great example. Andy and Paul, another rep in the book, used a strategy called the good guy, bad guy test. They had a director-level contact who claimed to be a champion. He swore he could get the deal done.
Right.
But Andy knew they needed to reach the chief information officer, the CIO, who was the actual economic buyer with the budget. The director was dragging his feet, making excuses about why they couldn't meet the CIO.
So what did they do?
Without telling the director, Andy called the CIO directly and scheduled a meeting that perfectly overlapped with a meeting they already had scheduled with the director.
That is insane. That is so incredibly bold. You are essentially bypassing your only contact in the building.
It forces the issue. So suddenly, the director walks into the conference room and finds himself face-to-face with his boss, the CIO, and the sales reps.
Oh man, the tension.
In that exact moment, the director has to make a choice. He either has to stand up, validate the reps, and advocate for the solution to his boss, proving he's a true champion, or he folds, stays quiet, and proves he was never going to fight for the deal in the first place.
You find out instantly what you are dealing with.
Instantly.
But man, that requires being comfortable with being very uncomfortable. And there's another test mentioned, the professional walkaway, which honestly sounds like professional suicide to me. You literally tell your contact, my boss thinks I'm wasting my time here and he wants me to walk away from this deal.
It's a high-wire act, but it exposes the truth. If the person is just a coach, they'll say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Good luck in your next role." They just let you walk.
Right.
But if they are a true champion and their personal bonus is tied to solving this problem, they will panic. They need your solution. They will immediately grab a whiteboard and outline a specific action plan to get the deal back on track and prove to your boss that it's real.
You really have to ruthlessly protect your time. If you spend 6 months talking to a coach who has no power, you lose.
You lose entirely.
Which brings us to another great analogy about navigating corporate power structures. The tree. This comes from Carlo, a legendary sales rep in Italy who sold massive enterprise deals to companies like Ferrari and Ducati. He explained that an organization is exactly like a tree.
The roots support the trunk supports the branches, and the branches support the twigs.
Okay.
When you look at a corporate hierarchy, sure, there is a little bit of discretionary budget down in the twigs and the lower branches, the mid-level managers, but the big money, the transformational money that changes a company's trajectory, that lives at the very top of the tree with the C-suite.
And most sales reps start at the bottom. They get an easy meeting with an IT manager, a lower branch, and then they try to climb up the tree from the inside. But what always happens?
They get blocked.
Yes. The mid-level manager gets insecure and doesn't want the rep going over his head to the VP. Or a competitor who is already higher up in the tree just steps on their fingers. Carlos said you absolutely have to start your sales motion at the top of the tree.
But to survive at the top of the tree, you have to speak a completely different language.
What do you mean?
The CEO does not care about your software's user interface or API integrations. They care about business terms, EBITDA, market share, risk mitigation, shareholder value.
Right, the infernos.
Exactly. If you start high but you open your mouth and speak low-level feature jargon, the CEO will immediately relegate you back down to the twigs. They will say, "This sounds like an IT problem. Go talk to my manager."
But it's scary to call a CEO. It's super intimidating. It is so much more comfortable for a rep to call the friendly IT manager who actually wants to talk about tech specs. And this human desire for comfort over effectiveness is perfectly explained by the story of Gray Boy the cat.
Ah, Gray Boy. This is one of the most profound illustrations of the pain-pleasure dynamic in human behavior.
Tell the story.
So Gray Boy was a cat who got stuck high up in a tree. He was terrified. It was starting to rain. The owner stood at the bottom of the tree holding out food, coaxing him, calling his name, but he wouldn't budge.
Why not?
Because the immediate, acute fear, the pain of climbing down a tree backward, was greater than the dull pain of just sitting on the branch in the rain.
It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Exactly. It wasn't until a massive, violent thunderstorm hit, with lightning cracking and thunder booming, that the calculus finally changed. Suddenly, the pain and terror of staying in the tree massively outweighed the fear of climbing down. Once that threshold was crossed, Gray Boy scrambled down the tree instantly.
Humans in a corporate environment are exactly the same. Reps avoid the pain of asking hard, confrontational qualification questions. They don't want to ask the prospect, do you actually have the budget for this? Because they're terrified the answer will be no and their pipeline will shrink.
Yes.
And managers like Jim avoid the pain of demanding accountability from reps like Kathleen because they don't want to ruin the friendly culture.
Everyone just wants to stay comfortable in the tree. It's only when the end of the quarter arrives, the board is demanding answers, and the forecast completely collapses. The thunderstorm hits, that the pain forces them to act.
But by then, it is entirely too late. The quarter is missed, and people get fired.
Which is exactly why you need a rigid, objective methodology to force that uncomfortable action early in the quarter before the thunderstorm hits.
This brings us to the operational core of the book: qualification, control, and the GPS of sales.
Managing a complex million-dollar enterprise deal without a qualification methodology is literally like trying to drive from Boston to Los Angeles without a map, without a compass, and without a GPS.
You might know you generally need to head west, but you have no idea what road you're on. You don't know where the traffic jams are, you don't know if you have enough gas, and if your boss calls and asks what time are you arriving, you have absolutely no way to give them an accurate answer. You are just guessing.
Exactly. A qualification framework is your GPS. In the book, they use a famous framework called MEDDPIC. Now, we don't need to get bogged down in every single letter, but it stands for metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, paper process, identify pain, champion, and competition.
Okay, MEDDPICC. Let's not gloss over that, because that is the sheet music we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
How does this actually work in practice? How does it act as a GPS?
Let's take just a few coordinates from that GPS to take decision process.
Okay.
If a rep doesn't know the exact sequence of events the customer requires to make a purchase, like who has to sign off, what committees have to meet, how long legal review takes, they cannot accurately forecast the deal.
That makes sense.
Or take paper process. This is where deals go to die.
The paper process, you mean procurement and legal.
Yes. A rep might have the champion on board. The economic buyer has approved the budget. The software is perfect. The rep forecasts the deal to close on Friday. But they didn't map the paper process. They didn't know that the customer's legal team requires a mandatory 30-day security review for all new cloud vendors.
Boom. The deal slips to next quarter. The rep misses quota, the manager misses quota, Raj misses his board projection. Not because the customer didn't want to buy, but because the rep didn't have their GPS turned on.
And understanding these coordinates tells you exactly who is in control of the deal. Control in a complex sales cycle is not static. It shifts dramatically.
Or so.
Well, in the early stages, the customer is in absolute control. They hold all the information, they know their pain, they know their budget, and they know their own internal politics. The rep is just trying to extract that information.
But if the rep does their job right, if they do deep discovery and find that massive inferno of a problem, control shifts to the rep in the middle stages.
Right, because the champion needs them now.
Exactly. The customer's champion now desperately needs the rep's information. The champion needs the ROI models, the technical proof points, and the case studies from the rep to go justify the massive purchase to their own internal finance committee. The rep basically becomes the consultant.
However, the late stage is where the trap is set. If the rep loses control in the final stretch to the competition or to that internal paper process, specifically procurement, the value of the deal just evaporates.
Procurement departments at Fortune 500 companies are highly trained, highly incentivized assassins.
They really are.
Their entire job is to strip control away from sales reps at the end of a quarter and slash the contract price.
Oh, the red flags. The psychological warfare that procurement uses is just brutal. Let's talk about some of these tricks because they are universally applied. First, there's the disappearing friend act.
Oh, I've heard of this.
It's a classic maneuver. The rep has been working with a contact for 6 months. They're texting, they know each other's kids' names, they are practically best friends. Then, the last week of the quarter arrives, the contract goes to procurement, and suddenly, the friend goes completely dark. They don't answer calls, they don't reply to emails.
The rep panics. They think the deal is dead, so they preemptively offer a 20% discount just to get someone to pick up the phone.
Exactly. The silence was weaponized. Then you have the shame game.
How's that work?
Procurement gets on the phone with the rep and the manager and says, "We looked at your pricing. You software vendors are just printing money. The margins are disgusting. You should be ashamed of charging us this exorbitant price when we are such a loyal customer."
They use guilt and moral outrage to force a massive discount. And if the manager is weak, if the manager is a Jim who just wants to be liked, they fold instantly.
Instant.
But my absolute favorite, the most devious one, is the one more thing strategy.
The Columbo technique. You finish a brutal, month-long negotiation. Everything is agreed upon. The price is set. The procurement officer literally has the pen in their hand to sign the contract. And right before the ink hits the paper, they pause and say, "You know what? I can get this through right now, today, if you just throw in free implementation and a year of premium support. Otherwise, I have to take this back to committee next week."
It's extortion. But if the rep doesn't have a GPS, if they don't know the true quantified value of the pain they are solving, they panic. They see their commission slipping away, so they cave and just give away $100,000 of services for free.
This constant need for control, structure, and intense accountability ultimately points us toward the deepest theme of this entire analysis: true leadership, culture, and the non-negotiables.
Right.
Because you cannot implement DDPICC or demand rigorous forecasting if your company culture is broken.
So what does a winning culture actually look like? Because this material totally explodes the prevailing Silicon Valley myth. We all know the stereotype, right? The hot new startup with the ping pong tables, the kombucha on tap, the beanbag chairs in the break room.
Yeah, the fun office.
The managers who want to give everyone a hug and be their best friend. Jim fell completely into this trap initially. But the reality is, ping pong tables do not create a winning culture.
No, they create a comfortable culture, which, as we saw with Gray Boy the Cat, is the enemy of growth. The harsh truth of corporate life is that people don't leave companies. They leave managers.
That's a famous saying for a reason.
And specifically, they leave managers who do not develop them. True caring in a professional environment is not a hug. It is not overlooking a missed quota.
True caring is taking the time, the effort, and the discipline to make your people highly competent.
Yes, competence leads to winning, and winning leads to pride, financial stability, and career momentum. If people aren't earning, learning, and winning, all the free beer in the world won't keep your top performers from quitting.
They will leave to go work for a demanding manager who actually makes them better.
Absolutely.
So how do you actually build that competence? It comes down to establishing what the book calls non-negotiables. Jim, the manager who wanted to be everyone's friend, finally figures this out. He maps it back to the analogy of raising his kids.
Right, he realizes he doesn't negotiate with his kids every single morning about whether they're going to brush their teeth or go to school.
Those are minimum operating standards for a functioning household. A sales team, or really any business unit, needs the exact same thing. They must have a baseline standard performance.
Yes.
Updating the CRM, mapping the decision process, doing pre-call research, these cannot be optional activities. And here is the harsh reality of leadership. If a manager lets a non-performer slide on the non-negotiables, they are actively penalizing their top performers.
I love the hockey stick analogy for this. It perfectly visualizes the damage of a weak manager.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a hockey coach is running an intense practice.
Mhm.
A new player skates out onto the ice, but he's not holding a stick and he's not wearing a helmet. If the coach just shrugs, says, oh well, and lets him run the drills anyway, what happens to the psychology of the rest of the team?
The rest of the team immediately loses all respect for the coach.
Exactly. They are sweating, they are following the rules, they are executing the plays. They look at the guy with no stick and think, why am I working so hard to maintain the standard if this guy gets to do whatever he wants with zero consequences?
The structural integrity of the team is destroyed in an instant. You cannot treat everyone equitably if you tolerate mediocrity. The standard is the standard.
Right.
But, and this is a big caveat, you also can't just enforce a standard blindly. You can't just put anyone in any role and expect them to succeed just because they work hard. Which brings us to the Tom Brady principle.
Tom Brady. He is arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play the game of football. He understands the geometry of the field, the defensive schemes, and the rhythm of the game on a level very few human beings ever will.
Sure.
But if you take Tom Brady and put him in as a middle linebacker, he would be an absolute unmitigated disaster. He would be hospitalized.
Because he doesn't have the specific physical skill set for that specific motion. And yet, managers in the business world do this all the time.
All the time.
They hire a rep who is an absolute rock star at high-velocity, transactional, small business sales, someone used to closing 3 deals a day over the phone, and they put them in charge of a complex 9-month, multi-million-dollar enterprise sales cycle.
It is a completely different position. The transactional rep relies on momentum and charm. The enterprise rep relies on patience, strategic mapping, and navigating procurement.
Yeah.
As a leader, you have to recruit the exact specific skill set for the specific sales motion you are running. You can't just hire good salespeople. You have to hire the right athlete for the position.
And managing all these different athletes requires a very specific type of awareness. It's not just about looking at spreadsheets. A great manager has to develop what the text calls emotional proprioception. Proprioception is a fascinating biological sense. It's your body's ability to perceive its own position in space.
Like how?
Well, if a trail runner is sprinting through the woods, they don't have to look down and stare at their feet. Their nervous system feels the terrain, the rocks, the mud, the incline, and instantly adjusts muscle tension and foot pressure to keep them upright and moving fast.
A great leader has to develop that exact same acute, almost subconscious sensitivity to their team. You have to feel the emotional terrain of the sales floor.
Exactly.
You have to be intensely aware of how your words, your tone of voice, and your micro-expressions impact the people around you. You have to know when Carlos needs space, when Kathleen needs to be challenged on her zombie deal, when Hamlin needs a life preserver, and when Shannon needs a reality check.
You cannot just run blindly through the woods screaming swim. You have to adjust to the terrain.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've explored today. The soul of this entire deep dive, the painful lesson embedded in Forgo's chaotic QBR, is that scale requires structure.
It really does.
Whether you are dealing with a complex enterprise sales process, managing financial forecasting for a board of directors, or simply trying to manage human beings relying on sheer brute force, Or the blind optimism of happy years will inevitably crash the plane.
Measurement is the absolute first step to control. You cannot understand or predict what you do not accurately measure.
Right.
And control is the first step to improvement. You have to establish the non-negotiables, you have to hand out the sheet music before you can ever hope to make the orchestra play in harmony.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking exclusively about high-stakes, corporate sales, quarterly business reviews, and enterprise software. But I want to leave you with a final thought that applies to everyone listening. Consider this. The psychology of the structured sale governs almost every meaningful human interaction you have.
It really does. Think about your own life outside of a QBR. When you're sitting down to negotiate a raise with your boss, or you're pitching a radical new project to an executive team, or even if you're just trying to convince a skeptical partner to make a major life change like moving to a new city or buying a house.
Are you acting like a glorified scorekeeper, just throwing out a list of features and hoping for the best? Or are you relying on happy years, only hearing what you want to hear while ignoring the objections?
Or are you operating with a defined playbook?
Exactly. Are you taking the time to truly discover the other person's pain and what they stand to lose if things stay the same? Are you testing your champions to see who will actually support you when the conversation gets difficult?
The next time you find yourself needing to persuade someone to take a leap of faith, ask yourself, am I stuck down in the branches talking to the wrong person, or am I calling at the top of the tree?
Something to mull over before your next big pitch, whether that's in a boardroom or just at your kitchen table. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of leadership and persuasion. We'll see you next time. What if the exact skills that made you an absolute superstar as an individual contributor,
Right.
like the hustle, the solitary grind, the sheer brute force of your work ethic,
Yeah.
what if those are the very things setting you up to completely fail the moment you become a manager?
It's arguably the most common and destructive professional paradox out there, honestly.
Yeah.
A company looks at their top performer and just assumes, oh, they can do the job flawlessly, so naturally they know how to teach someone else to do it.
Which is a massive leap.
Huge, because those are two entirely different psychological skill sets. I mean, they aren't even the same ballpark.
So in this deep dive into our source material, specifically focusing on Chapter 4, which covers first-line managers, we are really going to explore that critical and honestly painful transition from frontline worker to frontline leader.
Yeah, painful is definitely the right word for it.
For sure. So you're about to learn why trying to manage a team through just like raw activity tracking and sheer willpower is a guaranteed recipe for burnout.
Oh, absolutely. It just doesn't work at scale.
Exactly. And more importantly, we are going to break down the actual mechanics of transformational leadership, like how to actually take a struggling, chaotic team and build them into a self-sufficient, high-performing machine.
Which is the dream, right?
And this matters deeply for anyone who's, interested in business, scaling a startup, or even just your own personal career growth. Because scaling any organization is fundamentally impossible if your frontline leaders don't know how to truly coach.
Yeah, that bottleneck of growth is exactly where so many companies they die.
They hit a wall.
Exactly. And what makes the material we are diving into today so vital is that, well, it originates from the highly competitive, high-stakes environment of enterprise business-to-business sales.
Right. Highly aggressive environments.
Right. But the psychological traps we're going to unpack, they apply across the board.
I mean, human psychology is human psychology, right?
Exactly. Whether you are an engineering lead who's suddenly managing a team of developers, or a retail manager, or an agency director, if you have ever been handed a team and told, hey, make them as good as you are going to face these exact same hurdles.
I want to start with a concept that really jumps out from the material, something they call the glorified scorekeeper phenomenon.
This is such a classic trap.
It really is. To grasp this, we need to set the scene of what's actually happening inside, say, a rapidly growing company. So let's say a startup just secured a massive Series B funding round.
Okay, so the pressure is on.
Oh, totally. The venture capitalists are demanding aggressive growth. So the company spends millions recruiting, onboarding, and training their new frontline reps.
Millions. They spare no expense on the front line.
Right. But when it comes time to promote their top-performing rep to a management position to oversee all these new hires, the budget for management training is practically non-existent.
It is a massive systemic void. It's crazy.
Why do they do that?
Well, the leadership team operates on this fundamentally flawed assumption. They think, well, Sarah was our best rep. She crushed her numbers. Let's just make her the manager, and she'll just, sprinkle her magic on everyone else.
Like it's contagious or something.
Right. But Sarah has never been taught the mechanics of adult learning or conflict resolution or pipeline diagnosis.
She just knows how to sell.
Exactly. And suddenly, she's handed a quota that is 10 times larger than her old individual target. She feels the weight of the entire team's performance just crushing her.
And without any structural training on how to lead, she panics.
Yep. A very predictable human reaction occurs. Panic. And when professionals panic, they instinctively revert to controlling the only variables they actually understand.
Which is usually sheer activity volume.
Right.
Like just do more.
Exactly. Just raw volume.
That makes total sense, honestly. If
Yeah.
you don't know how to improve the quality of your team's work, you just demand a higher quantity of it.
Right. That's the default setting. More, more, more.
More emails sent by the end of the day, more cold calls logged in the CRM, more meetings booked.
Yeah, the text uses this depressing but incredibly vivid analogy of a gerbil on a wheel.
Oh, man. The gerbil wheel.
Right. The reps are forced to just run faster and faster, performing the exact same flawed activities, while the manager just sits there monitoring these empty key performance indicators.
Just staring at a dashboard.
Exactly. And those empty KPIs are the absolute hallmark of a glorified scorekeeper. A manager staring at a screen, counting how many emails went out, is completely oblivious to the actual content of those emails.
Or why they aren't even working in the first place.
Exactly. The reps are never learning new skills. They are literally just accelerating their own failure.
This just leads to profound exhaustion, right? I mean, the text points out that this environment creates a staggering 35% attrition rate.
Which is huge.
Yeah, people don't just underperform. They physically and mentally burn out and leave the company.
They just break.
It reminds me of, like, a high school basketball coach who evaluates practice by measuring how much the players are sweating, rather than checking to see if the ball is actually going through the hoop.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
You're confusing biological activity with strategic accomplishment. Like, sweating means they are working hard, sure, but if the mechanics of their jump shot are totally broken, running them through more cardio drills isn't going to win the game.
No, it's not.
You are just going to have an incredibly tired team that loses by 30 points on Friday night.
Yeah, taking that basketball analogy further, let's look at the actual financial domino effect of a manager who only tracks sweat.
Okay, let's hear it.
When a manager acts merely as a scorekeeper, they aren't diagnosing the root cause of a failure. In the business world, if a manager doesn't know why a specific deal is stalled, they have zero actual insight into the health of their pipeline.
You're just guessing.
Exactly. They are relying on hope and high activity numbers, which means the forecasts they send up to the executive team are entirely fictional.
I want to pause on that because the ripple effect of a bad forecast seems like it could, honestly, tear a company apart. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Oh, it destroys companies.
How does a frontline manager not knowing how to coach directly lead to a company-wide crisis?
So think about the chain of command. A frontline rep tells their manager, hey, I made 50 calls today and I feel really good about closing this massive account.
Okay.
The manager, who is just keeping score of the 50 calls, says, great, put it in the forecast.
Right, because 50 calls equals good.
Right. Then that forecast goes up to the vice president, then to the CEO, and finally to the board of directors.
It just keeps rolling uphill.
Yep. The CEO looks at the numbers and says, wow, we are projecting $10 million in new revenue this quarter. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and hire 50 new software engineers and sign a lease on a bigger office space.
Oh, man, I see where this is going.
Yeah, because the manager didn't know how to diagnose the reality of that deal because they were just counting calls instead of analyzing the quality of the interactions. The deal falls through.
The client says no.
Exactly. The real revenue comes in at $5 million, not 10. But the CEO has already hired those 50 engineers and signed the expensive lease.
The money is already spent.
Suddenly, the company's cash burn rate is completely out of control. The venture capitalists panic, and the company is forced into mass layoffs. It is a catastrophic catch-22.
Wow.
The executive team cannot safely scale the business because they can't trust the revenue numbers.
Yeah.
And they can't trust the numbers because their frontline managers lack the coaching framework required to accurately qualify what their teams are actually doing.
Which means, if you are listening to this right now and you're stepping into a leadership role, your immediate priority has to be auditing your own metrics.
100%.
You have to look in the mirror and ask, am I measuring empty activities, like hours logged at a desk or emails blasted out, or am I measuring tangible advancements?
Right. Real milestones.
Exactly, like a project successfully clearing a legal review or a client agreeing to a specific technical milestone. The takeaway here is that you have to kill the scorekeeper mindset and adopt a diagnostic mindset.
But to do that effectively, though, we really need to dive into the psychology of the people who find themselves trapped in this dynamic.
The new managers themselves.
Exactly. The source material outlines two very distinct psychological archetypes of the first-time manager. And understanding them is crucial because almost every new leader defaults to one of these two profiles when they are under severe stress.
Okay, let's break those down. The text names them Andy and Jim. I want to start with Andy because this profile feels incredibly common in high-pressure industries.
Oh, Andy is everywhere.
Right. Andy is described as a former athlete who grew up facing a lot of adversity. His entire mechanism for surviving life and succeeding in his career thus far has been brute force.
Yes. Andy is a fascinating case study in how coping mechanisms from our personal lives bleed directly into our professional styles.
How so?
Well, he learned early on that to overcome obstacles, he just needed to lower his shoulder, suppress his emotions, and literally push through the pain.
And as an individual contributor, that worked brilliantly for him, right?
Brilliantly. He outworked everyone. He grounds out the results. But when he is promoted to management, he applies that exact same brute force to a team of human beings.
Which is a disaster.
Total disaster. He manages purely through the power of his positional authority. He doesn't sit down and coach a struggling rep. He interrogates them.
He's the guy pacing the floor, pointing fingers and barking, "Just get it done. Stop giving me excuses."
Exactly.
He operates on intimidation, making his entire relationship with his team completely transactional.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Jim.
Okay, let's talk about Jim.
Jim's background is slightly different. He was like a college hockey captain. Because of his deep experience in team sports, his instinct is inherently communal.
He's a team player.
Exactly. He understands that team chemistry matters. He genuinely knows that his primary job should be coaching and developing his people.
Yet, the text points out that Jim fails just as spectacularly as Andy does. How does the guy who actively wants to be a coach still fail?
Because desire isn't a methodology.
Wow, okay. Say more about that.
Jim has the empathy and the intention to be a great coach, but he completely lacks the structural how.
He doesn't know the steps.
Right. When a rep comes to him struggling, Jim wants to help, but he doesn't have a diagnostic framework to identify the specific skill gap. He can't break down the mechanics of the job into teachable components.
So what does he do?
He just ends up offering vague encouragement like, hey, you'll get him next time. Or worse, he jumps in and just tries to do the work for them.
Oh, the classic "let me just do it" manager.
Exactly. This leaves Jim feeling anxious and totally overwhelmed, and his team feels adrift because they lack clear, actionable direction.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
We're painting Andy's brute force approach as this highly toxic, fundamentally flawed style. But let's live in the real world for a second.
Okay.
If I'm running startup, we're at the end of the quarter, our backs are completely against the wall, and we are about to miss our numbers. I kind of want Andy.
You want the enforcer.
Yeah, I want the guy who's going to light a fire under the team, demand strict accountability, and force people to grind it out. Why is that wrong? Isn't raw grit exactly what a company needs to survive those moments?
Look, I completely understand that instinct. And to be clear, the source material absolutely does not dismiss the necessity of grit.
Right.
Resilience and drive are non-negotiable in business.
Yeah.
But the fundamental flaw in your argument is confusing grit with direction. Grit, when it's applied without a strategic framework or real coaching, is just fiction.
Friction. That's interesting.
Yeah, it creates an enormous amount of heat, but it doesn't actually move the vehicle forward. The fatal flaw with Andy's brute force at scale is the culture it inevitably creates over time.
The burnout.
Yes. The text uses a phrase that has become a bit of a cliche, but only because it's profoundly true. People don't leave companies, they leave managers.
So the turnover kills you before the results can save you.
It's actually worse than just turnover. Let's look at the mechanism of fear.
Okay.
When you manage through intimidation, like Andy does, you create a purely transactional dynamic. The reps aren't working to achieve a shared vision. They are working solely to avoid Andy's wrath.
Just trying to stay off his radar.
Exactly. And in a fear-based culture, what is the very first casualty? The truth.
Oh, wow. People start lying.
Exactly. If a massive client project is secretly falling apart or a major deal hits a roadblock, the rep is terrified to bring that bad news to Andy. They know they will just get yelled at.
So they hide it.
They bury the problem deep down and just pray for a miracle.
And by the time the miracle doesn't happen and the deal officially dies, it is way too late for Andy to step in and fix it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which circles us right back to the forecasting crisis we discussed earlier. Bad news cannot wait.
It has to travel fast.
If you are a leader, your ability to save a sinking ship depends entirely on your team bringing you the leak on day 1, not day 90. Andy's brute force practically guarantees that his team will lie to him about the actual state of their work.
That reframes it completely. So for the listener, the practical application here is a moment of brutal self-reflection. When the pressure is on, when you are stressed, which default setting do you revert to?
You have to know your default.
Right. Do you harden up, become authoritarian, and rely on brute force like Andy? Or do you become highly empathetic but structurally paralyzed and lost, like Jim? Recognizing your own stress response archetype is the first step.
Because both paths require a conscious, deliberate pivot towards structured, intentional coaching.
The obvious question then becomes, if tracking hollow metrics is a trap and managing through brute force is a trap, how does a new manager actually spend their day? Where should their focus be?
Well, this leads us into an incredibly common physical and psychological trap outlined in the material.
The cubicle.
The cubicle, or, for the remote work era, the endless stream of internal Zoom calls and Slack channels.
Right, the digital cubicle.
Exactly. New managers have this bizarre tendency to just hide. They get sucked into this vortex of internal bureaucracy, attending update meetings that have absolutely no clear agenda, writing endless reports, and obsessing over internal politics.
It's almost as if they're trying to look as busy as possible to justify their fancy new title.
It is a classic defense mechanism.
Is it really?
Oh, totally. If you don't know how to get in the trenches and fundamentally improve the skills of your team, you distract yourself with the illusion of work. Internal bureaucracy feels safe.
You can just check off boxes all day.
Right. But the text cuts through all that noise and outlines 3, and literally only 3 actual priorities a manager should have.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Priority 1 is recruiting A players. Priority 2 is developing your reps' knowledge and skills out in the field. And priority 3 is leading and coaching.
Notice what is entirely absent from that list. Attending internal alignment meetings.
Nowhere to be found.
I look at it like being a lifeguard. You cannot teach a struggling swimmer how to do the butterfly stroke by sitting up in a lifeguard chair and sending them a PDF memo.
No, you can't.
You definitely can't teach them by tracking how many laps they flail through on a spreadsheet. Eventually, you have to climb down from the chair and actually get in the water with them.
I love that analogy.
You have to observe the mechanics of their stroke, correct their breathing in real time, and physically demonstrate the technique.
That is the perfect visualization of field coaching. Getting in the water. But getting down from the chair and getting into the water with your team requires a really high degree of psychological security.
What do you mean by that?
Well, this brings up a fascinating dynamic the text explores regarding the A leader versus the B leader.
Let's get into this.
So an A leader is deeply secure in their own competence and value. Because they are secure, their primary goal is just excellence. Therefore, they aggressively recruit and hire A players.
People who are brilliant.
People who are fiercely driven, and in many cases possess skills that are vastly superior to the manager's own skill.
Right. They want the best talent possible because they view a high-performing team as a reflection of their leadership, not a threat to it.
Exactly. But then you look at the B leader. The B leader is fundamentally insecure. Deep down, they suffer from massive imposter syndrome.
They feel like a fraud.
Yes. They are terrified that if they hire a true A player, that new hire will eventually outshine them, expose their weaknesses, and maybe even take their job.
So they surround themselves with mediocrity to protect their own ego.
They hire C players. They deliberately build a team of people who are visibly less competent than they are, ensuring that the manager always looks like the smartest person in the room.
That is so toxic.
It is. This toxic insecurity cascades down the entire organization and completely stunts the growth of the company. Escaping the cubicle and truly getting in the water demands the confidence of an A leader.
It takes guts.
It means having the courage to hire people who might actually intimidate you, observing them in the live environment, and acting as a guide to elevate them even further.
So the takeaway for our listener right now is to pull up your calendar for next week. Look ruthlessly at every single internal meeting you have accepted.
Be ruthless.
If a meeting lacks a crystal clear agenda that directly impacts revenue or team development, cancel it.
Just decline.
Reclaim those hours and spend them observing your team in the wild. Join their live client calls, review their actual project code, sit in on their presentations. Stop trying to manage from the safety of the lifeguard stand.
Now, making the decision to get into the water is one thing, but once you are there, you need a functional framework. You can't just hover over your employee's shoulder and say, do better.
Right, that's just annoying.
You need a structured approach to how you actually communicate and coach.
This is where we get into the absolute core of today's deep dive. The material lays out what it calls the 9 basics of transformational leadership, and they frame it around a philosophy they call Billy Basics.
Which I love.
The underlying premise here is beautiful, I think. True mastery isn't about adopting wildly complex theories. It is about executing simple fundamentals with flawless consistency to unlock limitless potential.
Because complexity is often the absolute enemy of execution. If a team doesn't have a shared grasp of the absolute basics, introducing advanced strategies is just adding noise to a chaotic system.
Let's weave through these fundamentals, starting with the massive danger of lacking a common vocabulary. It sounds overly simplistic, but the text illustrates how a linguistic disconnect can literally ruin a business.
It happens constantly. Imagine a scenario where a manager asks a rep, "Hey, are you currently talking to the decision maker on this account?"
The standard question.
Very standard. And the rep enthusiastically says, "Yes, absolutely." So the manager marks the deal as highly likely to close, but they never actually define the term.
Oh, I see.
To the rep, a decision maker is the mid-level IT director who loves the software and really wants to use it. But to the manager, the decision maker is the chief financial officer who actually holds the authority to sign a 6-figure check.
The rep thinks they're crushing it. The manager thinks the money is in the bank. And the reality is they haven't even initiated contact with the person who controls the budget.
Not even close.
The entire forecast is built on a linguistic illusion. Establishing a rigorously defined common vocabulary across the team is the prerequisite for any actual communication.
And that leads directly into the mechanics of how we communicate, specifically the science of listening.
This one is fascinating.
The text highlights a biological quirk that makes human beings inherently terrible at listening.
We are just wired poorly for it.
They really are. The human brain is capable of comprehending language at a rate of roughly 250 words per minute. However, the average person only speaks at a rate of about 150 words per minute.
That creates a massive 100-word per minute cognitive gap.
A huge gap of idle brain time.
And I am incredibly guilty of falling into this exact trap. Because my brain is idling, waiting for the person to just finish their sentence, my mind starts to wander.
You drift.
I start anticipating where their story is going. I start formulating my brilliant counter-argument, and inevitably, the impatience just takes over and I interrupt them. I find myself listening merely to reply rather than listening to truly understand.
You just described the default state of almost every manager on Earth. But consider the cost of that impatience.
What's the cost?
If an employee comes to you trying to explain a nuanced, complex problem with a client, and you interrupt them halfway through to tell them what you think the solution is, you have stopped gathering information.
You cut off the data supply.
Right. You are no longer diagnosing their reality. You are just projecting your own assumptions onto their situation. Ineffective listening guarantees ineffective coaching because you're usually solving the wrong problem.
Which makes the next fundamental, simply being present or be here, so critical.
Yes, be here now.
It is the only antidote to that biological urge to drift. In the context of modern work, partial attention is a plague. If you are sitting in a one-on-one meeting with a direct report and you leave your laptop open, fielding Slack notifications out of the corner of your eye while they are speaking, you are destroying trust.
You are. And you are also destroying your own ability to utilize intuition. We tend to think of intuition as this mystical sixth sense, but the material grounds it in pure reality.
How do they define it?
Intuition is simply the focused observation of what is not being said. It is noticing the slight hesitation in a rep's voice when they mention a specific client.
Oh, yeah.
It is recognizing a shift in their body language or realizing that they are conveniently omitting a key detail they usually always talk about.
But if your eyes are darting to your phone every 30 seconds, you will miss all of those microsignals. Your intuition goes completely blind.
Exactly. And coupling that external observation with deep self-awareness is the next crucial step.
Self-awareness as a manager.
A transformational leader must be acutely aware of their own physical and emotional triggers. Let's say you have a manager who is entirely unaware that they have a very intense, deeply disappointed, resting facial expression whenever they hear unexpected complications.
Oh, man. Even if they aren't actually angry, their face says, "You have failed me."
Precisely. Remember how Andy created a culture of fear? A lack of self-awareness can accidentally create that exact same culture.
Without even meaning to.
Right. If an employee comes to you with a minor problem and they see your face contort into visible frustration, their brain registers you as a threat.
Biological.
The next time a problem arises, they will hesitate to tell you. If you do not manage your own emotional output, you will unintentionally stifle your team's willingness to be transparent.
This brings us to what feels like the absolute pinnacle of this entire framework. We need to spend some real time exploring the shift from transactional leadership to transformational leadership.
This is the big one.
Because this is where the actual coaching happens.
Absolutely. A transactional manager operates purely on positional power and a system of compliance.
Command and control.
Right. The implicit contract is, do exactly what I say because I am the boss and I control your paycheck. If you don't hit the metrics, you will be penalized.
And it works to a degree, right?
It works, but it yields the bare minimum effort required to not get fired. The employee is giving you compliance, but they are absolutely not giving you commitment.
So how does a transformational leader flip that dynamic? How do you actually get real commitment from a defensive, guarded employee?
A transformational leader stops treating the employee as a cog in a machine and starts viewing them as a unique human being with their own specific set of fears, motivations, and life aspirations.
And make it personal.
Very personal. The leader initiates a deeply personal discovery process. They sit down and ask questions that have absolutely nothing to do with the daily metrics. Things like, why did you take this job? What is the financial threshold you are trying to reach? When you picture your life in 5 years, what does it actually look like?
And people just open up and tell them.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Not immediately, no.
No.
It requires immense trust, which is why being present and actively listening are non-negotiable prerequisites. But once the leader uncovers that intrinsic motivation, they perform a bit of psychological alchemy.
Wrong from me. I like that.
They align the individual's deeply personal goals with the company's corporate goals.
I see. So instead of a transactional manager saying, you need to make 50 cold calls today because the company needs more pipeline and I am your boss, a transformational leader connects the activity to the employee's actual life.
Exactly. The transformational leader says, you told me 3 months ago that your primary goal is to save enough for a down payment on a house for your family by next year. Right.
Tying it back to their why.
Right. To hit the commission tier that makes that down payment possible, we need to increase your closing rate. The way we increase your closing rate is by mastering objection handling, which means we need to practice it live on 50 calls today. Let's dig in and work on this together so you can get those keys.
That is a staggering paradigm shift.
It changes everything.
The employee is no longer working for the manager or even really for the company. They are working for their own transformation, and the manager has just positioned themselves as a necessary guide on that journey.
And that leads to the proper sequence of management, which the text defines as inspire, coach, and inspect, in that exact non-negotiable order.
Inspire, coach, inspect. Okay,
Yeah.
This scorekeeper we talked about earlier only does the last step, right? They just inspect the data.
And inspecting without inspiring is just policing. It profoundly demotivates people.
Makes sense.
First, you must inspire the employee by connecting the mundane daily tasks to their grand personal goals. Second, you must coach them by getting in the water and showing them how to execute the task effectively.
And then,
Only after you have inspired and coached do you earn the right to inspect the results.
but that requires a massive amount of preparation, which ties into the necessity of intentional outcomes.
You can't just wing it.
Right. I have been guilty of walking into a weekly one-on-one meeting with a team member, sitting down and just asking, so what's going on this week? How are you feeling?
Oh, the classic open-ended trap.
Right. And inevitably, the meeting just evolves into a 30-minute therapy session of venting about other departments with no actual progress made.
Because you walked into a professional interaction without a defined agenda. The framework insists that a leader must never enter a one-on-one without a premeditated win-win outcome in mind.
You have to have a goal.
You have to ask yourself before you even open the door, what specific skill gap am I trying to close today? What mindset shift do I need to facilitate right now?
And the final piece of this puzzle is applying all of this with an urgent curiosity, all while keeping things simple.
Simple is key.
Synthesizing complex corporate strategies into simple, executable daily behaviors for your team is the hallmark of great leadership. But you must execute it with urgency, because time is the ultimate enemy.
Time kills momentum, time kills deals, and time allows minor team dysfunctions to metastasize into highly toxic culture.
It just festers.
Exactly. When a leader senses a problem, they cannot passively wait for the next quarterly review to bring it up. They must employ a relentless, urgent curiosity to dig to the root cause of the issue immediately.
That is a profound amount of psychological heavy lifting for a new manager to take on. So for the listener who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all these concepts, your practical takeaway is hyper-focused.
Oh, small.
Right. Do not try to implement all of this tomorrow. Pick just one fundamental behavior. For example, choose be here.
That's a great one to start with.
In your very next professional conversation, whether it is with a direct report, a peer, or your boss, physically close your laptop, put your phone in a drawer, maintain eye contact, and give them your absolute undivided attention.
You will be shocked by the results.
Notice how profoundly it changes the depth and the quality of the information you receive.
That behavioral shift alone will yield massive returns. However, we do have to recognize the limits of psychology.
What do you mean?
Well, a transformational mindset, deep listening, and intense empathy are wonderful, but without a structural system to channel them into, they were just good intentions.
Ah, right. You still need a process.
Exactly. The final pillar of this transition from worker to leader is establishing a rigidly codified process for your team.
This is about moving a team away from relying on art, charisma, and luck, and moving them toward relying on science, structure, and repeatability.
Yes.
The text uses an absolutely phenomenal analogy for this.
Yeah.
A professional symphony orchestra.
I love this part. Think about the fundamental nature of music. Around the entire world, it is strictly codified. You have notes, A, B, C, D, E. You have time signatures and scales.
Right.
These elements provide a universal, unyielding structural foundation for sound.
Right. And because those notes are codified, a master conductor can walk into a room with 50 musicians who have literally never spoken to each other, hand them sheet music, and within minutes they can collaboratively perform a breathtaking, complex symphony.
It's incredible.
Without that underlying structure, an orchestra is just 50 people in a room making random, terrible noise.
Now, apply that to a business team. A sales force or an engineering team operating without a strictly codified process is a cacophony of different methods.
Everyone is just playing their own tune.
Exactly. Every individual is just winging it, trying their own, artistic approach. When everyone operates on their own chaotic frequency, the manager is completely blind.
You can't manage what you can't measure.
A CEO quoted in the text summarizes this perfectly. If you cannot measure a process, you cannot understand it. If you cannot understand it, you cannot control it. And if you cannot control it, you are completely powerless to improve it.
So, practically speaking, what does mapping out a structured step-by-step process actually achieve for a team?
It delivers massive benefits across 3 different vectors. First, for the frontline employee, it provides a navigational roadmap.
That removes the guesswork.
It completely removes the anxiety of ambiguity. They have clear, objective indicators of success. They know exactly what logistical steps must be completed to move their work from phase 1 to phase 2. It replaces hoping for a lucky break with executing a reliable system.
And for the manager, what's the benefit there?
For the manager, a codified process acts as a surgical diagnostic tool. This is how you escape the trap of just telling people to work harder.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine you have mapped your team's workflow into 5 distinct stages. You have an employee who is incredibly charismatic and great at initiating projects in stage 1, but as you review the data, you see that their projects consistently die when they reach stage 3.
And stage 3 is what?
Let's say stage 3 involves deep technical validation.
Suddenly, you have X-ray vision into their performance.
Exactly. You aren't just sitting them down and giving them vague, emotionally charged feedback like, hey, you really need to step it up, your numbers are bad.
Which just makes people defensive anyway.
Right. Instead, you can look at the objective framework and say, look, the data shows you are an absolute master at stages 1 and 2, but we have a mechanical breakdown happening consistently at stage 3. Let's dive in and practice the specific technical validation skills required for that stage.
It completely depersonalizes the critique and makes the coaching hyper-targeted.
Exactly. And the third vector is the impact on the client, or the end user. When a team operates with a logical, milestone-driven process, the experience for the customer ceases to feel chaotic or pushy.
It feels structured.
It feels like a consultative journey where their specific problems are methodically uncovered and solved.
It creates a predictable environment where everyone, the employee, the manager, and the client, understands exactly where they are in the journey and what needs to happen next.
It's just alignment across the board.
So if you are leading a team today, your homework is non-negotiable. You must be able to walk up to a whiteboard and, purely from memory, map out the specific sequential stages of your team's workflow.
If you can't do that, you're in trouble.
If you cannot clearly define the steps your people are supposed to be taking, you cannot possibly diagnose why they are failing. You have to codify the sheet music before you can ever hope to conduct the orchestra.
When we pull all of these incredibly dense threads together, from avoiding the scorekeeper trap to recognizing the brute force instincts of Andy to mastering the fundamentals of deep listening and codifying a process, what we're really talking about is a profound shift in personal identity.
Let's crystallize that thought. The soul of this chapter is the realization that true leadership is this painful, ego-destroying shift from being a star player who relies on their own sweat, force, and individual heroics to becoming a dedicated coach.
A coach who relies on systemic structure, deep emotional intelligence, and the mastery of simple fundamentals.
You have to accept that your professional value no longer comes from your ability to execute the task better than anyone else.
And that part is over.
Your value and your real power comes entirely from your ability to discover your team's personal aspirations, align those aspirations with the company's mission, and meticulously remove the roadblocks in their way.
And perhaps the most surprising and profound insight from all of this is understanding the ultimate destination of a manager.
The end goal.
If you do this job perfectly, your goal is not to become the indispensable hero who constantly swoops in to save the day when things go wrong. Your ultimate goal as a leader is to actually make yourself completely obsolete to your team.
It is the ultimate paradox of leadership.
It really is.
When you have transformed your people to the point of complete self-sufficiency, when they've internalized your coaching, mastered the codified process, and no longer need you to diagnose their problems, that is the moment you have truly succeeded.
You have built a high-performance machine that no longer requires its mechanic.
You now understand the psychological mindset and the structural foundation required to effectively lead a frontline team. You know how to stop tracking sweat and start analyzing the mechanics of the game.
But there's still a missing piece.
Exactly. Once you have built that foundation and codified your process, what exactly are the sequential stages you are leading your team through?
Right.
How do you train them to get inside the mind of a complex buyer, uncover their deepest business pains, and create an undeniable urgency to act?
That's the next level.
That is exactly what we're going to unpack next time as we turn the page and dive into the specific psychological stages of the business-to-business buying process. Until then, ask yourself, are you building a team that is entirely dependent on your raw brute force to survive? Or are you building a self-sufficient orchestra that can play the symphony flawlessly, even when you aren't in the room?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.